Chapter 1, Aurora Ainsworth, Let's Get a Divorce. In the third year of hiding her identity as a wealthy heiress to marry a billionaire CEO, he proposed a divorce. Ethan Kingsley's voice was calm and steady, as if he were discussing the most ordinary of matters. But the words struck Aurora like a thunderbolt, making her stumble. She couldn't help but look at the woman standing beside him. Is it because she's back? 3 years ago, Sylvia Shaw had left the country to pursue her dreams, rejecting Ethan Kingsley's marriage proposal. The proud young master of the Kingsley family, wounded, had found a random woman to marry the day after Sylvia left. Ultimately, he chose Aurora Ainsworth. He chose her because she came from poverty with no background to speak of. When the time came for a divorce, she wouldn't pose the slightest threat to him. And so, Aurora had dutifully played the part of a spiteful rebound for 3 years, obedient and devoted, attending to his every need. She had thought she could finally win his heart, but she never imagined that the moment Sylvia returned, all 3 years of her efforts would be undone in an instant. Ethan's dark eyes were deep and unreadable. Yes, he couldn't deny that although Aurora's status was low, she was a virtuous and capable homemaker, embodying the role of a wife to perfection. Unfortunately, what Ethan Kingsley wanted was never a good wife and loving mother. He needed a woman outstanding enough to stand at his level. Clearly, Aurora was not that woman. He disliked her origins and detested her meek, clinging vine demeanor. He placed the signed divorce agreement on the table. "Sign it. I'll give you however much money you want." Seeing the indifference in his eyes, Aurora felt a suffocating tightness in her chest. 3 years of marriage, and he was this desperate to cast her aside. When she remained silent, Ethan pulled out a check and placed it on the table. "This is $10 million. Is that enough?" A sour numbness spread through Aurora's heart. It took her a long moment to find her voice, which came out raspy. "Ethan Kingsley, in your eyes, what am I? A transparent placeholder, forced to watch you bring your old flame home. A beggar who can be dismissed with $10 million. Or a pathetic fool who abandoned everything to love you, only to receive nothing in return?" She had tried for 3 whole years. Even a stone should have been warmed by now, shouldn't it? How could he trample on her dignity and ignore all her love so completely? Ethan looked at her despairing face, his dark eyes perfectly calm. "When we got married, I told you. You would be my wife, and I would give you the status of a wealthy madam. Nothing more." It was as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over her, chilling her to the bone. Beside them, Sylvia watched Aurora's expression with satisfaction. She deliberately swayed and fell into Ethan's arms. "Ethan, my head is spinning. I think I drank too much at the party." As expected, she immediately captured Ethan's full attention, leaving him with no time to deal with Aurora. "Sign the divorce papers and leave as soon as possible," he told Aurora coldly, before sweeping Sylvia into his arms and carrying her upstairs. The next second, Aurora watched in horror as he carried Sylvia into their bedroom. She felt as if all the blood had been drained from her body, leaving her frozen in place. So, she had been wrong from the very beginning. Ethan Kingsley was never the man for her. She closed her eyes, and a single tear traced a path down her cheek. A dense, sharp pain spread from her heart, so intense it was hard to breathe. It was time to see things clearly. She reached for the divorce agreement on the table and signed her name, stroke by deliberate stroke. Then she looked at the check and tore it into tiny pieces. She didn't want a single cent of the Kingsley family's money. She had been a fool before. From now on, she would never be so foolish as to give her heart away again. After doing all this, Aurora gathered her things and left the Kingsley mansion without a backward glance. Outside, a torrential downpour raged. She threw her apron and all her luggage into the trash, as if discarding the foolish, deplorable self of the past 3 years. Then, standing in the rain, her eyes cold and clear, she made a phone call. "Come pick me up. I'm coming home." 20 minutes later, a fleet of 100 limited edition luxury cars sped through the rainy night. The procession of cars was so immense, its roaring engines startled the servants at the Kingsley estate. A group of servants ran out, only to see a cloud of dust settling in the distance. Were their eyes deceiving them? The person picked up by that fleet of luxury cars, could it have been the madam? The servants went back inside the mansion and ran into Ethan, who had just put Sylvia to bed. One of them, bolder than the rest, finally spoke up. Young master, it looked like the madam was just picked up by 100 luxury cars. Chapter 2, Ethan's expression was cold, and he didn't even look up. The Kingsley family has no need for servants with poor eyesight. The servants flinched. They immediately remembered that the madam had no background, came from the countryside, and had only a middle school education. Since marrying into the Kingsley family, she had been endlessly ridiculed as a sparrow who had turned into a phoenix. This was why the young master disliked her and why Mrs. Kingsley looked down on her. How could she possibly know people who drove luxury cars? And those cars, they weren't cheap. Owning even one would be incredible, yet they had seen 100 of them at once. It seemed they must have been mistaken. Terrified of losing their jobs, the servants quickly apologized and never dared to mention the matter again. Meanwhile, the 100 luxury cars sped on, finally stopping in front of a magnificent manor. Dozens of bodyguards got out in unison, first opening the door of the lead-stretched Lincoln, then standing respectfully on either side. Mr. Sterling, the butler, ran out from the manor. When he saw it was really Aurora, he was overjoyed. "Eldest miss, you're finally willing to come back," Aurora gave a faint smile, her tone carrying the commanding presence of a superior. "Mr. Sterling, I'm back." The next moment her mother, Catherine Ainsworth, also came out to greet her. "Aurora, is that you?" Seeing the white strands in her mother's hair, Aurora's eyes reddened. "Mom, I'm sorry. I've been an unfilial daughter. I'll never run away from home again." 3 years ago, after falling in love with Ethan Kingsley and hearing that he wanted to marry a woman with no background, she had defied her family's wishes, hidden her identity, and married him. She thought she had found true love, but instead, her heart had been trampled on. Now, she had finally come to her senses. She was born a phoenix among people. To think that for the past 3 years, she had willingly become a caged bird for a man, it was laughable. Catherine naturally understood her daughter's capabilities. A double doctorate from Harvard, she was strategic and decisive. Everyone said she was a rare business prodigy. Yet, 3 years ago, for the sake of love, she had willingly humbled herself to wash her hands and cook for a man. Seeing that her daughter had come around, Catherine gripped her hand excitedly. "You're finally back. For the past 3 years, the Shengyi Group has been in one crisis after another under your cousin's management." Aurora thought of her dandy cousin, Julian, and wasn't surprised. A cold, determined light shone in her eyes. "Don't worry, Mom. Now that I'm back, I won't let him act recklessly anymore." Shengyi was the legacy her grandfather had left her. She would not allow anyone to touch it. The next day, news of the eldest Miss Ainsworth's return spread throughout the entire group. Years ago, after the old master of Sheng, he passed away and left the vast family business to Aurora, she had acted with ruthless decisiveness, purging those who had grown restless after her grandfather's death during the company's most vulnerable time. But soon after, she had disappeared. Now, with her return, everyone was filled with curiosity. Julian Ainsworth hadn't seen his cousin in 3 years and believed he had solidified his position as CEO. Even though news of Aurora's return had spread through the company, he remained in the president's office, refusing to budge. What could a woman do to him? Julian had always been deeply dissatisfied that the old man had insisted on leaving the company to her. Although Aurora had left a team of loyalists at Shengyi when she left 3 years ago, Julian had used his status to force them out and seize the position of acting CEO. He wasn't about to give it up so easily now. But soon, the office door was pushed open. 4 bodyguards in black suits walked in and, without a word, began dismantling and throwing out all of his belongings. Then, 2 of them lifted his executive chair and prepared to haul him out. Let go of me." Just then, a woman with dark hair, red lips, and wearing a Chanel suit walked in. Aurora took off her sunglasses and smiled faintly. "Cousin, did you like my welcome back gift?" "Aurora Ainsworth, on what grounds are you kicking me out?" Julian's face turned black with rage. Aurora slowly produced a document. "On these grounds." Julian took one look and was speechless. It was their grandfather's will, clearly stating that Shengyi was to be inherited by Aurora Ainsworth. Chapter 3, "But I've been managing Shengyi for the past 3 years. You've been managing it?" Aurora looked at him coldly. "In these 3 years, how much has Shengyi lost, and how much money has ended up in your pocket? Do you need me to draw up a report for you?" As expected, Julian froze. How could he have forgotten? Before she disappeared, this cousin of his was a top graduate from Harvard, the successor their grandfather had valued most. You'd better leave now, while I'm not inclined to pursue this. Otherwise, if I make you spit out all the money you've swallowed over the years, I'm afraid you'll end up bankrupt. In the end, Julian could only leave Shengyi in disgrace. Aurora officially took over the group, but the situation was not good. Just as her mother had said, the only reason Shengyi hadn't gone bankrupt under Julian's management was because of its deep-rooted foundation. She worked for several days straight, barely managing to sort through the mess of the past few years. 3 days later, her secretary knocked and opened the office door. Miss Ainsworth, Vice President Ainsworth, was scheduled for a dinner meeting this afternoon regarding an investment project. Will you be attending? Aurora frowned. She had no desire to attend a function on Julian's behalf, but she had heard that many company CEOs would be there. What kind of investment could be so attractive? After a moment's thought, she made a decision. Arrange it for me. Meanwhile, at the Tian's group, Ethan Kingsley's assistant walked into his office. Mr. Kingsley, the eldest miss of Shengyi Group, has recently returned. Oh, Ethan looked up with interest. He had long heard of the formidable reputation of this Shengyi heiress. Years ago, when the chairman of Shengyi passed away, he entrusted the heavy responsibility to a young woman. With various factions eyeing the company, Shengyi was on the brink of collapse. But as soon as she took charge, she used swift and decisive methods to make those people dare not act rashly. Clearly, she was the real deal. Ethan had been somewhat interested in this heiress for years and had even considered a partnership, but unfortunately, she had suddenly disappeared for some reason. And now, she was back. Seeing his boss's interest in the new CEO of Shengyi, the assistant added, "There's a dinner tonight that you've been invited to. I hear this new Shengyi CEO will also be there. Would you like to go?" Ethan's dark eyes flickered. "I'll go and see," he said faintly. "Understood." That evening, Aurora arrived a little late to the private room. As she pushed the door open, the room fell silent for a moment. Dozens of men in suits sized up the woman before them. Unfazed, Aurora walked in and introduced herself. "Good evening, gentlemen. I am Aurora Ainsworth, the new CEO of Shengyi Group." With that, she reached out and poured herself a glass of strong liquor. "My apologies for being late. Please allow me to toast as an apology." She downed the high-proof spirit in one go. Seeing her so straightforward, the men at the table began to speak up. "Miss Ainsworth is truly a direct person. We've long heard that the heiress of the wealthy Ainsworth family is extraordinary. Indeed, she is. Miss Ainsworth, please, have a seat. You're not leaving until we've all had our fill tonight." Amid the welcoming chorus, Aurora took a seat, making small talk while quietly listening to them discuss the investment. The host of the dinner was a man named Vincent, who was said to have just returned from Wall Street. He was the one leading the investment. After seeing Aurora, he kept whispering in her ear about how rare and profitable this project was. After a while, someone else spoke up. "It seems Mr. Kingsley of Tian's group isn't here yet." Aurora's head snapped up. Ethan was coming too. Just then, a waiter knocked on the door. "Excuse me, Mr. Kingsley of Tian's group has arrived." Chapter 4, Ethan stepped out of the elevator and followed the waiter to the exclusive private room. When he entered, only a room full of men remained. He glanced around the room, surveying everyone present. The female CEO wasn't there. For some reason, a flicker of disappointment crossed his mind. He then said calmly, "My apologies for being late." At that moment, outside the private room, Aurora, who had had a few drinks, was being escorted into an elevator by another man in a suit. Leo Vance looked at her with amusement. "I couldn't find you for 3 years, and now I run into you at a dinner." Aurora smiled faintly. "It just goes to show we're fated to meet." Leo was her childhood friend. A moment ago, when Aurora wanted to leave, Vincent had insisted on stopping her. Luckily, Leo was passing by, recognized her voice, and helped her get away. The two made their way to the underground parking garage, where Leo started his Maybach to drive her home. The cool night breeze on her face made Aurora feel a bit better. "I heard Ethan Kingsley was coming too. What, did you run out early just to avoid your ex-husband?" Hearing that name again, she thought she would feel a sense of loss, but her heart was surprisingly calm. She answered lightly, "No, I just think there's something wrong with that investor." Leo's expression turned serious. You mean Vincent, the guy from Wall Street? Aurora nodded. We talked for over 20 minutes, and all he mentioned was high returns and high interest rates, without a single word about the risks. Plus, his resume seems a bit too polished to be true. An undefeated Wall Street trader, why would he suddenly return to the country and offer a project that's practically giving money away, as if he's doing charity for Rongcheng? Now that she put it that way, Leo also found it strange. He approached my grandfather a while back, but the old man is traditional and unwilling to get into these kinds of investments, so nothing came of it. Hearing you say it, it does seem odd. Aurora shook her head. In business, one must never blindly chase profits, so whether Ethan had come tonight or not, she would have left anyway. The next day, Aurora gave instructions to her assistant. We're not proceeding with Vincent's investment. Cancel the project. The assistant looked at her, confused. But I heard several other companies have increased their investment. Are we really pulling out? Aurora nodded firmly. Yes, we're out. Her decision gave the old board members who didn't approve of her an opportunity to criticize. With Julian stirring up trouble from behind the scenes, the entire group was soon whispering that the new female president was just a pretty face who knew nothing about business, causing the company to lose a major project right after she arrived. Aurora was aware of the gossip, but she didn't care and continued with her work. About 10 days later, news broke. Vincent had disappeared with the over $1 billion in investment funds he had raised. He was nowhere to be found, dead or alive. An investigation later revealed that he was a financial fraudster in North America, specializing in scamming large corporations. Upon returning to the country, he had immediately set his sights on Rongcheng. Of all the companies he had targeted, only 2 had escaped unscathed. One was the Shengyi Group, and the other was Ethan Kingsley's Tian's Group. Suddenly, those in the Shengyi Group who had doubted Aurora had nothing more to say. Meanwhile, at the Tian's Group, an assistant walked into Ethan's office to report the matter. Mr. Kingsley, you were right. That Vincent character was indeed a scammer. That night in the private room, Ethan had only stayed for half an hour before sensing something was off and promptly withdrew. He looked at his computer, unfazed. Anyone who fell for such a scheme deserved to be scammed. The assistant added, I heard the Shengyi female president also left early that night. She and you are the only 2 who weren't tricked into investing. Her again? It seemed that even after 3 years, this heiress's mind hadn't dulled. He found it truly strange. If they were cousins, how could the previous acting CEO of Sheng Yi have been such an idiot? Tian's and Sheng Yi were supposed to partner this year, but due to some foolish actions by Julian, Ethan, who had no patience for dealing with morons, had simply abandoned the idea. Now, perhaps, it was worth another try. He said nonchalantly, contact Sheng Yi, see if they're still interested in the partnership we proposed at the beginning of the year. Yes, sir. But the response from Sheng Yi came back quickly. It was simple and direct, no interest, not considering, will not cooperate. The words were decisive, leaving no room for negotiation. This Sheng Yi heiress, did she have a particular aversion to working with Tian's? But Ethan wasn't bothered. He, too, was a proud and favored son of heaven. He had no time to guess at others' thoughts, so he didn't give the matter any more thought. Chapter 5. Summer, you saved Sheng Yi hundreds of millions this time. Shouldn't you treat yourself to a nice reward? Seeing that Aurora had been engrossed in work ever since she returned home, Leo Vance, at the request of her mother, had specifically dragged her out for a shopping trip. Aurora herself had very little desire for shopping, but she couldn't refuse the kindness of her mother and friend, so she went with Leo to the largest mall in Rongcheng. The 2 walked into a luxury shoe store. Looking at the sparkling high heels in the display cases, she actually found herself somewhat interested. Now that's more like it. Look at you, still wearing shoes from 3 years ago. Leo spoke up for her indignantly. Did the Kingsley family go bankrupt? Did Ethan never spend any money on you? Aurora lowered her gaze, suddenly lost in thought. Back then, she had been so focused on pleasing Ethan that she had no mind to dress herself up. Leo thought he had touched a sore spot. Just then, his phone rang. He waved his hand apologetically and stepped out to take the call. Aurora couldn't help but find it amusing. She had just been reminiscing for a moment. After looking around a bit more, she stopped in front of a display case featuring a pair of classic, dark green silk high heels. Could you take these out for me to see? After the sales associate brought them out, Aurora liked them at first glance and was just about to try them on. Suddenly, a familiar, sharp voice came from behind her. Aurora Ainsworth. Miranda Kingsley and Sylvia Shaw had just walked into the store when they saw a familiar figure. It was none other than her poor excuse for an ex-daughter-in-law. Seeing them, Aurora showed no reaction, merely glancing at them before turning her attention back to the shoes. Miranda was furious. This country bumpkin used to fawn over her every day, and now that she was divorced, she dared to ignore her. She said cuttingly, "Using the alimony you got from divorcing Ethan to buy luxury goods. Someone like you could be draped in designer brands and you'd still reek of poverty." Aurora frowned. "I didn't take a single cent of your family's money. You can go back and ask Ethan if you don't believe me." Miranda acted as if she'd heard a joke. "A poor woman from the countryside like you wouldn't take our money?" Her attitude was so vile. Aurora had only tolerated her for Ethan's sake, but now she certainly wouldn't. Just as she was about to speak, Sylvia, who had heard enough, said slowly, "All right, Auntie, don't let this ruin your mood for shopping." Only then did Miranda huff and turn to look at shoes in another section. But a few minutes later, Sylvia also took a liking to the same pair of shoes in Aurora's hands, which happened to be the last pair in the store. She walked over to Aurora. "Miss Ainsworth, are you buying these shoes? I'd like to buy them too. If you're not buying them, I'd rather not buy a pair that someone else has tried on." Though her tone was one of negotiation, she was actually certain Aurora couldn't afford them and was trying to stop her from even trying them on. Aurora found it utterly laughable. This Sylvia, with her gentle and kind demeanor, was actually a soft knife. "Miss Shaw, you speak with such authority. Anyone who didn't know better would think you owned the store." Sylvia immediately put on a wronged expression. "I was just afraid you'd try them on and not buy them. That would be a waste, wouldn't it?" Just then, Miranda walked over again. "Exactly. Who would want to buy shoes that have been tried on by someone like you? Besides, didn't you say you didn't take my son's money? Can you even afford them?" Aurora was about to lose her temper when a cold voice came from behind her. "Wrap these shoes up." Leo walked to Aurora's side and said to the sales associate, "Also, find out how many pairs of these shoes are available in the entire city. We'll buy them all." Aurora felt it was unnecessary and tugged at his sleeve. But Leo continued, "It's fine. Otherwise, it would be bad luck to end up wearing the same shoes as certain people of low character." The remark was clearly aimed at Sylvia. Her face flushed with anger, but Leo looked like someone not to be trifled with. Even Miranda could only watch with a pale face. Who was this man, willing to spend so much money on Aurora? After the shoes were wrapped, Leo took Aurora's hand and walked out, not giving the two women a second glance. Watching their backs, Sylvia said pointedly, "That man seems very good to Miss Ainsworth. No wonder she didn't want Ethan's money when they divorced." Miranda said hatefully, "So what if she's latched onto a new, wealthy connection? She'll just be played with and discarded." Chapter 6 at the Kingsley residence. Ethan was holding an exquisite wood carving he had found in the bedroom. It was a lifelike deer, so finely crafted it didn't look like a mass-produced item, but rather something personally carved. Then he noticed a small, stylized cloud carved at the bottom. Did Aurora carve this? How could an ordinary woman from the countryside with little education create such a piece of art? Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly as he thought, a little distracted. He had never been interested in Aurora's life before. His knowledge of her was limited to her name. He certainly didn't know what she could or couldn't do. Now, thinking back carefully, she did seem to always be carving a piece of wood. For some reason, he didn't throw the carving away. Perhaps its craftsmanship was simply too exquisite. Throwing it away would be a terrible waste. Ethan opened a cabinet and placed the wood carving at the very bottom. As he looked up, he saw rows of clothes, neatly categorized and arranged. He froze again, remembering that this was also Aurora's doing. To be honest, she was incredibly meticulous. Knowing he was always busy with different occasions, she would organize his wardrobe by event, putting together complete outfits with accessories. Outfits for work, for business dinners, for events, for formal galas. He could just grab one and go when needed. And her taste in fashion seemed to be quite good, too. The outfits she paired were always simple yet elegant, rivaling those of professional stylists. As Ethan thought about it, his handsome brow slowly furrowed. Aurora Ainsworth. Was she really just an uneducated woman from the countryside? The thought had barely surfaced for 2 seconds when the bedroom door suddenly opened and Sylvia walked in. Ethan instinctively closed the wardrobe. Is something wrong? Sylvia had been snubbed by Aurora today and naturally wouldn't miss the chance to complain. She said deliberately, "It's nothing, just that Auntie is a bit upset." "What's wrong?" She bit her lip. "We ran into Aurora Ainsworth at the mall today. She was with a very wealthy man and they seemed very close. She also talked back to Auntie a few times." A man? A strange feeling flickered in his heart. She used to act like she was madly in love with him. Had she moved on to someone else's arms so quickly? For some reason, Ethan's mind instantly recalled Aurora's gentle and submissive demeanor in front of him. Would she be like that with other men? He frowned slightly and said coldly, "We're divorced. There's no need to pay her any mind." With that, he strode out of the bedroom and went to the study. But the name Aurora Ainsworth kept echoing in his mind, her wood carving, the clothes she arranged, and this new man. He suddenly felt that he had never really known his so-called ex-wife. After a long while, he dialed a number. "I need you to investigate someone for me." After a short break, Aurora threw herself back into her work. Leo still came to find her from time to time, either asking her to have lunch with him or wanting to take her out, which annoyed Aurora so much she wanted to hit him. At noon, Leo snuck away from his own company and came to Shengyi again. Aurora said deadpan, "No lunch, no golf, no racing." Leo feigned a look of heartbreak. "You're so cold, and here I was having prepared a special surprise for you." Only then did Aurora spare him a glance. "What is it?" He smiled mysteriously and showed her his phone, which was open to a private online forum. It was filled with wealthy Chinese-American wives, all cursing out Sylvia Shaw. Some had even posted screenshots of hotel records, showing Sylvia checking in with their husbands. Your ex-husband's old flame, who pretends to be some high-class intellectual woman, is actually a notorious social climber in North America. Her reputation was so ruined there that she had to come back. Rumor has it that for every 10 wealthy wives in the US, she's tried to seduce the husbands of at least 3. Aurora scrolled through the forum for a bit, finding some of the pictures so scandalous she quickly closed the page. She was somewhat surprised. The woman Ethan couldn't forget was this kind of person. She didn't know if he was blind or if she had been blind for once falling for him. Leo said with a mischievous grin, "Do you want to tell your unfortunate ex-husband and enjoy the look on his face when he finds out the truth?" Aurora tossed the phone back to him, completely uninterested. Not interested. Why would she tell him? A scumbag and a tramp. A match made in heaven. Meanwhile, in the Kingsley family study, the person Ethan had sent to investigate Aurora had returned with results. The available information is the same as 3 years ago, and after she left the Kingsley residence, we can't find any trace of her. The person on the other end reported word for word. Ethan's dark eyes were incredibly deep as he hung up the phone. For the first time, he found this ex-wife, whom he had once disdained to understand, to be somewhat mysterious. Where had she gone? Where could she have gone? After a while, for some unknown reason, he found her number in his contacts and, as if possessed, dialed it. A mechanical female voice soon came through. He had been blocked. Ethan was stunned for a moment, then let out a harsh, cold laugh and threw his phone onto the desk. Chapter 7. A few hours later, Sylvia walked into the study. Ethan was working. Sylvia said tentatively, "Ethan, you work so late every day. You should find someone to share the burden or your health will suffer." He replied faintly, "It's fine, you should go rest." Sylvia pressed on, "But I want to help you." Ethan was dealing with an urgent contract, and a hint of impatience crept into his voice. "There's no need." He didn't look up at her, so he didn't see the ambition and greed hidden in her eyes. She was not from a wealthy family. Although her parents were intellectuals, they weren't rich. Sylvia had been immersed in the world of power and money abroad for years, and couldn't escape it. If she hadn't been forced to leave the US, she wouldn't have returned. After returning and discovering that Ethan hadn't forgotten her, she naturally wouldn't let him go easily. But more than Ethan himself, she wanted the Kingsley family's vast fortune. However, although Ethan was good to her, he was always extremely cautious when it came to company matters. She could never find an opportunity to get involved in Tian's affairs. She was also afraid of being too obvious and having him find out. Just then, Ethan, perhaps realizing his tone was a bit harsh, stopped and said, "Sylvia, your birthday is coming up. I'm planning a party for you. You should rest well recently and not worry about other things." Sylvia could only force a smile. "Thank you, Ethan." As she turned to leave, the unwillingness in her eyes was palpable. After leaving the study, she began to form another plan. Yesterday, she had run into Julian Ainsworth, the recently ousted head of Shengyi Group, at the Crestview Club. Shengyi Group, the company of the richest man in Rongcheng. If she could get her hands on Shengyi, what worries would she have about power and money? In her eyes, the new female president of Shengyi was just a pampered heiress, and Julian was an utter moron. This family was much easier to manipulate than Ethan Kingsley. A vicious glint flashed in Sylvia's eyes. She had already made her decision. Returning to her room, she dialed Julian's number. "Young Master Ainsworth, how about we make a deal?" A few days later, while having dinner with Leo Vance, Aurora mentioned Julian's strange behavior over the past 2 days. "He's always hated that Grandpa gave the company to me. This time, he actually offered to treat me to dinner to apologize," Aurora said as she cut her steak. Leo, thinking of Julian's conduct over the past 3 years, said seriously, "Aurora, your cousin's character is truly worrying. You'd better be careful." Of course, Aurora knew that. Otherwise, her grandfather wouldn't have refused to let him inherit any shares of Shengyi. Thinking about the dinner invitation for tomorrow, she felt more and more that something was wrong. "Leo, can you help me find out what Julian has been up to these past few days?" Leo was also worried about her safety and immediately sent someone to investigate. The results of the investigation were chilling. Looking at the surveillance footage of what Julian had bought, Leo's face turned ashen. "I'm going to go drag that animal over here right now," Aurora stopped him, her eyes turning cold. "Don't be rash. You're going to let him go? He wanted to." Aurora shook her head. "I'm not that much of a saint. It's just that we don't have enough evidence right now. I have to go to the dinner tomorrow to catch him in the act." She let out a cold laugh. "My dear cousin, his life has been too easy. It's time he went to a place where he can properly reflect on his actions." The next day, Aurora went alone to the club where Julian had invited her. She walked into the private room, seemingly without any precautions. The room was filled with a strong fragrance, and it was empty. Julian hadn't arrived yet. In reality, he and Sylvia were sitting in the adjacent private room, listening intently to the sounds from next door. Suddenly, a sharp scream echoed out. Chapter 8. Julian's face lit up with excitement. "Did it work?" Sylvia's eyes darted around. She certainly didn't want to be directly involved in this. "You go check." Julian immediately ran out, excitedly calling the people he had waiting outside to let the reporters in. But his assistant stammered back, "Young Master Ainsworth, we've been discovered." Julian's brow furrowed as he pushed open the door to Aurora's private room. "Useless, who discovered you?" The moment the door opened, his words caught in his throat. Aurora was not drugged and unconscious at all. She was sitting calmly on the sofa in the middle of the room, looking at him coldly. And the 3 burly men he had hired were being held on their knees by several bodyguards. He began to tremble, unable to speak clearly. You didn't fall for it. A pea brain like you trying to harm others," Aurora said mockingly. "Julian Ainsworth, I thought I treated you well enough. You actually tried to drug me, hire men to assault me, and even brought in reporters to publicize it. What? Did you think I would die of shame and hand Shengyi over to you?" Dream on. Seeing that his plan had been exposed, a ruthless glint flashed in Julian's eyes. He said viciously, "Yes, I wanted to harm you. Shengyi was supposed to be mine." Aurora felt he was beyond saving. "Stubbornly unrepentant," she said coldly. "Then go and repent in prison." Just then, several police officers in uniform rushed in and slapped handcuffs on him. Only then did Julian realize that what he had done wasn't something money could solve. It was a crime. He shouted anxiously, "It wasn't my idea, it was Sylvia. She's right next door. Go arrest her." Hearing that name, Aurora's brow furrowed. The police immediately ran to the next room, but Sylvia, seeing things had gone wrong, had already fled. Aurora quickly turned and leaned against the window of the private room, seeing a luxury car with a very familiar license plate slowly driving away below. She recognized it. It was a car registered under Ethan Kingsley's name. Julian was still shouting his innocence, but someone like Sylvia was far too cunning. She had always given him instructions in person, leaving no evidence behind. The drugs and the men had all been arranged by Julian. She hadn't even shown her face. Aurora's eyes glinted with a chilling light. Without giving Julian another glance, she walked straight out. That evening, at the Ainsworth Manor, Leo had already investigated the matter thoroughly. Before buying the drugs, Julian did meet with Sylvia twice. Aurora let out a cold laugh. I didn't have time to settle scores with her, and yet she delivers herself to my doorstep. Originally, she truly hadn't planned to bother with this woman. So what if she had stolen a man who didn't love her? Aurora had no intention of seeking revenge. But the result of her leniency was that Sylvia had used such a vicious scheme against her and even had designs on Sheng Yi. If something had happened to her, Julian would have been the primary heir to Sheng Yi. Then, by deceiving that idiot Julian, the vast fortune would have fallen right into her hands. What a brilliant plan. Aurora closed her eyes, and after a moment, a sneer escaped her throat. Leo looked at her. Aurora, what do you want to do? She curved her lips into a smile. I hear Ethan Kingsley is throwing a birthday party for her. For such a grand event, how could I not show my appreciation? The next day, Ethan received a call at his office from the Sheng Yi Group's CEO office. The secretary's voice on the other end was sweet. Looking at Aurora in front of her, she repeated her instructions word for word. Mr. Kingsley, our CEO would like to know if the partnership you mentioned last time is still on the table. Ethan paused. This Sheng Yi CEO was truly strange. Last time, she had acted as if she would never cooperate with him in her life, and now she was asking him to take the initiative. He toyed with the expensive pen in his hand, intrigued. What made her change her mind? The CEO says it's better to have a friend than an enemy. She was wrong last time. If you are willing to agree, we would be deeply grateful. Ethan narrowed his eyes. How do I know you're being sincere this time? We hear you are hosting a birthday party for your girlfriend soon. As a gesture of our sincerity for this partnership, our CEO will attend with a significant gift. Hearing this, it seemed this heiress was genuinely sincere. Ethan was not one to be coy. Sheng Yi could bring him benefits, and now that they were making a friendly overture, he wouldn't refuse. All right, I look forward to her presence. Chapter 9. The day of the birthday party, the scene was indeed grand. Ethan had given Sylvia plenty of face, booking the most expensive North Island hotel in Rongcheng. The ground floor parking lot was filled with all kinds of luxury cars. Various socialites and heiresses gathered around Sylvia, treating her like a princess. Even her parents, who were usually engrossed in their research work, were invited. Guests constantly praised her in their ears, calling her a well-bred lady from a scholarly family. Sylvia's vanity was greatly satisfied, compensating for her recent dissatisfaction over the failed plan. See, even without a vast fortune, she was still the center of everyone's attention, still possessed a respectable family background, and had a grand party and Ethan's love that all the other girls envied. Ethan accompanied Sylvia, mingling and greeting guests. He didn't actually enjoy such a noisy atmosphere, but for his girlfriend's sake, he had to endure it. Miranda was also there, dressed in a lavish gown, chatting with guests, every sentence filled with her satisfaction with Sylvia. Yes, Ethan and Sylvia are getting engaged soon. A girl like Sylvia is the only one who deserves him. His ex-wife, don't even mention that country bumpkin. She has nothing. How can she compare to Sylvia? She's not even worthy of being compared to Sylvia's toenail. As Ethan passed by, he happened to hear Miranda's undisguised belittling of Aurora. He frowned, feeling that his mother's words were tasteless in such a setting. Sylvia heard it too, and she was naturally smug about it. What she didn't notice, however, was that 3 more lavishly dressed ladies had entered the banquet hall. The ladies quietly approached Sylvia, then rushed forward and began to punch and kick her. Even Ethan was caught off guard and pushed aside by them. You tramp, did you think we wouldn't find you just because you ran back to this country? You homewrecker, you have the audacity to celebrate your birthday? The entire hall fell silent. Sylvia's hair was a mess from being pulled, and even her gown was torn. When Ethan finally reacted, his eyes were dark and menacing. He reached out to stop them. Who sent you here to cause trouble? The women were not intimidated in the slightest. She's the tramp who seduced my husband. I have every right to hit her. Sylvia hid behind Ethan, continuously denying it. No, Ethan, they're lying. I've never even met them. Just then, the large screen at the front of the hall suddenly went black. Immediately after, a series of photos flashed across it, photos of Sylvia in foreign countries, checking into hotels with various old, wealthy men. The photos played on a loop, and the crowd gasped in shock. Sylvia's intellectual parents saw it and were so angry they nearly fainted on the spot. Ethan's face was utterly black, his gaze like ice as he looked at Sylvia. Sylvia's face was ashen, but she was still putting up a final struggle. "It's not me, these photos must be photoshopped, Ethan, you have to believe me," one of the wealthy wives spoke up again. "Photoshopped? I have videos right here. Do you want me to play them for you so everyone can see if they're photoshopped?" Her words made Sylvia tremble all over, her lips quivering, unable to speak. The hall fell into a dead silence. Just then, the clear, loud voice of the doorman at the hotel entrance rang out, exceptionally jarring. Announcing the arrival of the CEO of Shengyi Group, Miss Aurora Ainsworth, the double doors swung open, and a woman in a silver haute couture gown walked in gracefully. Her features were stunning, and a smile played on her red lips. Chapter 10, seeing the gorgeously dressed Aurora Ainsworth, the frantic Sylvia clutched at her as if she were a lifeline. "Aurora Ainsworth, it was you trying to frame me?" Ethan was also stunned for a moment by Aurora's arrival. His suspicions were correct after all. Aurora was not some uneducated woman from the countryside with no background. But he had never imagined that Aurora would be the heiress of the Shengyi Group. For the past 3 years, Aurora had been deceiving him. And it wasn't just Aurora. Even Sylvia, whom he had thought to be innocent and pure, had been lying to him. The ever-proud Ethan Kingsley had been played for a fool by 2 women. His face darkened ominously. Aurora approached Sylvia with elegant steps. "Stop making baseless accusations. What did I frame you for? Did I force you to go seduce other people's husbands?" Aurora's calm tone and powerful presence instantly silenced Sylvia, but she quickly recovered. Her only option now was to deny everything and insist that Aurora was framing her. Otherwise, even Ethan wouldn't let her off. She knew Ethan too well. He hated being deceived more than anything. "It was you hate me for taking Ethan from you, so you deliberately set me up, HMPH. Aurora let out a light laugh. "Just a man. He's not worth so much of my effort." Hearing this, a subtle, unreadable change flickered in Ethan's eyes. "You? What do you mean?" Sylvia's words became hesitant, and her heart grew even more flustered. Aurora's gaze swept over Sylvia, like a hawk surveying its prey. "What do you think?" It seemed Aurora already knew about her conspiring with Julian to harm her. The nature of that incident was entirely different from seducing someone's husband. That was a crime that could land her in prison. So Sylvia placed her hopes back on Ethan. She walked towards him, desperately clutching his arm. "Ethan, Aurora is framing me. You have to believe me, I love you so much. How could I do something like that?" Ethan was an incredibly sharp man. He had already pieced together the general story. The idiot Julian getting thrown in prison recently must have been Aurora's doing. The reason was surely that he had done something to offend her and she had caught him. And behind it all, Sylvia was deeply involved. Ethan pulled his arm from Sylvia's grasp and shot her a look of disgust. Sylvia slumped to the floor, feeling a chill run through her entire body. She was finished. She had nothing left. Her reputation was ruined, and Ethan didn't want her anymore. The once lively birthday banquet ended in discord. Sylvia's scandal immediately shot to the top of the trending lists online, but it was quickly suppressed. Aurora knew Ethan had done it, but she didn't intervene. Her goal had been achieved. She had gotten her revenge on Sylvia and disgusted Ethan in the process. For a man as proud as Ethan, learning that the girlfriend he adored was such a person, and having it all exposed publicly, was enough to make him feel sick for a long time. Thinking of this, Aurora found it somewhat amusing. But it was all their own doing. A scumbag and a tramp, a match made in heaven. Ethan probably didn't even love Sylvia that much. His feelings for her were likely just an obsession. Otherwise, why would he have immediately found someone to marry right after she went abroad? Now, even that lingering obsession had probably dissipated. All that was left for Ethan was endless regret for not seeing Sylvia's true colors sooner. With Ethan's resources, finding out what Sylvia had been up to abroad would have been easy, but he hadn't done it. He was too confident in Sylvia. Or rather, he was too confident in himself. Chapter 11, Now that Julian Ainsworth was in prison, Aurora later provided the police with a great deal of evidence of his embezzlement and self-enrichment. He would likely receive a heavy sentence. She wouldn't be seeing him for a long time. Aurora's aunt and her family constantly came to trouble her. They couldn't get into the company because of security, so they started showing up at her home. Eventually, Aurora simply moved out and into a private villa she owned. When they couldn't find her at home, they eventually gave up. Aurora's grandfather had 2 children, her father, Andon Ainsworth, and her aunt, Jasmine Ainsworth. Her father, Andon, died in a car accident when she was very young, so she was mostly raised by her grandfather. Deeply influenced by him from a young age, she had an exceptional talent for business. Julian had been spoiled by his mother, Jasmine, and grew up to be a profligate heir who knew only how to eat, drink, and be merry. Yet he harbored great ambitions. Under Aurora's leadership, the Shengyi Group began to get back on track, slowly regaining its former glory. The shareholders' opinions of the newly appointed CEO, Aurora, shifted from initial doubt to now being full of praise. As for the sycophants Julian had left behind in the company, Aurora had cleaned them out completely. Aurora had just sat down in her office when a knock sounded at the door. "Come in." The person who entered was her secretary, Miss N. Miss N was holding a huge bouquet of roses, so large it completely obscured her. She carefully placed the roses on Aurora's desk and then breathed a sigh of relief. "Miss Ainsworth, your flowers." Aurora looked the bouquet up and down and found a card among the flowers. She opened it to find 4 words printed inside. "Happy cooperation." The font looked printed, likely placed by the florist. "Who sent these?" Aurora asked. Miss N replied, "The flowers were sent to the front desk for you, so I brought them up. I'm not sure who sent them." The mystery of who sent the flowers was soon solved because an unwelcome guest for Aurora at least arrived at the company, Ethan Kingsley. Since he was the CEO of Tian's Group, Aurora, as the CEO of Shengyi Group, naturally had to receive him. Ethan sat in the reception room, leisurely sipping his coffee, awaiting Aurora's arrival. A short while later, the door was pushed open. Aurora walked in, wearing a black suit dress and high heels. She wore exquisite makeup, her hair tied back in a professional low ponytail, looking every bit the powerful businesswoman. Seeing this version of Aurora, Ethan felt both familiar and strange. Before, he had only seen Aurora as a tool to get back at Sylvia for leaving the country, never giving her a proper look. He had never realized how beautiful Aurora was, or that she possessed such a commanding presence. "Mr. Kingsley, to what do I owe the pleasure of your visit today?" Aurora said with a polite smile. Seeing Aurora's polite and distant demeanor, Ethan felt a sense of unease. It felt as if something that had once belonged to him was now slipping away, and getting further and further away. Though he felt uncomfortable, he couldn't show it on his face. "Miss Ainsworth, you truly are a person of great importance with a short memory. You mentioned cooperation, but after crashing my banquet, you never brought it up again." The so-called cooperation was just an excuse for Aurora. She had only wanted to attend Sylvia's birthday party, to witness her downfall firsthand. She never thought Ethan would actually take her excuse seriously. She didn't know whether to call him naive or just plain stupid. Chapter 12. The matter of cooperation was not just an excuse for Aurora. It was also an excuse for Ethan. For some reason he couldn't explain, he just wanted to see her. He hadn't been sleeping well lately. Aurora's image constantly lingered in his mind. After all, they had been husband and wife for 3 years. Even if his initial reason for marrying her was not good, some feelings had developed during their time together. Aurora's sudden departure still left him feeling a bit unsettled. This was a new feeling for Ethan. 3 years ago, Sylvia's departure had only made him feel angry. But now, he felt an emptiness in his heart, as if something was missing, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. Aurora cleared her throat twice and said, "Regarding the cooperation, Shengyi hasn't found a suitable project yet, but the intention is still there. If an opportunity arises, I will approach Mr. Kingsley." Seeing Aurora's evasive words, Ethan wasn't angry. Instead, he found it amusing. He gave his assistant, Mr. Liu, a look. Mr. Liu took a file from his briefcase and placed it on the table between them. "I've brought a good project for Miss Ainsworth. I wonder if you're interested." Aurora opened the file. It was a development project for a plot of land on the west side of the city. The government had just released this land, and various public facilities like schools and hospitals were being developed around it. In the future, it would become a new economic zone. Many people had their eyes on this land. She was surprised Ethan had managed to secure it. "Why would Mr. Kingsley want to partner with me on such a good project?" Aurora asked directly. With the strength of Tian's group, they could have easily taken this project on by themselves. Aurora didn't believe Ethan was being so kind as to share a piece of the pie with her. Besides, their relationship wasn't one where they would think of each other when a good opportunity arose. So, Ethan's proactive approach to her must not be so simple. Ethan lowered his head and smiled slightly, then met Aurora's eyes. "With our relationship, shouldn't we cooperate on good projects?" Chapter 13, We Have No Relationship. A barely perceptible trace of panic was in Aurora's voice. The two had been playing dumb, maintaining a facade of politeness for a while. Now that Ethan had laid the facts on the table, Aurora felt a little uncomfortable. Moreover, the way Ethan was looking at her was strange, making her feel a bit creeped out. She just wanted to get rid of him as quickly as possible. Noticing Aurora's discomfort, Ethan changed the subject. "I'm sure, miss. Ainsworth knows that many people have their eyes on this piece of land. Now that it's in my hands, there will naturally be some who are not convinced. So, I thought if Sheng Yi and Tian's cooperate, no one should have any objections." Aurora thought about it and felt that what Ethan said made sense. In the business world, being targeted by many and becoming the center of attention, even with strong capabilities, it was hard to avoid being bitten a few times. Although it wouldn't cause any substantial damage, it was still annoying. Therefore, Tian's couldn't monopolize it. Finding a partner was the solution, and Shengyi Group was undoubtedly the best choice. In Rongcheng, there was no more suitable partner than Shengyi Group, and Aurora's capabilities were there for all to see. In a short time after taking office, she had cleanly resolved both internal and external troubles. Now, any businessman in Rongcheng who saw her had to give her a thumbs up. The value of this piece of land would only rise, not fall. Whether building residential housing or a shopping mall here, it would be a huge profit. In business, there are no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. Aurora felt there was no need to let Sheng Yi lose a money-making opportunity because of her past with Ethan. So in the end, she agreed to Ethan's cooperation request. At night, inside the largest club in Rongcheng, Leo Vance sat at the central booth, surrounded by many beautiful women. A short while later, a woman in a black slip dress and slender high heels walked in from outside. Seeing her, Leo immediately dismissed the beauties and got up to greet her. "Eldest miss, you're finally here. You have no idea how long we've been waiting for you." The woman was Aurora, who had changed her clothes and rushed over right after work. "That's right, Aurora. We haven't seen you in so long, and you're still late. You have to take a penalty drink." Exactly, a penalty drink. The people teasing her had also grown up with Aurora and were former classmates. They were all rich second-generation kids whose family companies also had partnerships with Sheng Yi. Today's gathering was organized by Leo. In fact, among those present, only Leo and Aurora had the closest relationship. The others were just superficial friends with various connections. They didn't have a deep friendship, but they still kept in touch. Faced with the crowd's teasing, Aurora straightforwardly took 3 penalty drinks. Leo didn't stop her. He knew Aurora's alcohol tolerance. No one present was her match. Ethan was also here today with a friend. "Hey, I'm telling you, Ethan, it's just a woman. You don't have to keep a long face all the time," said Ian Jiang, Ethan's childhood friend. Ever since the incident with Sylvia, Ethan had been in a bad mood, not attending gatherings with friends. So Ian thought he'd drag Ethan out to play and relax today. But he was still pulling a long face, and the girls only dared to watch from the side, not daring to approach. It was even affecting his own chances with the ladies. As soon as Aurora entered, she attracted a lot of attention, including Ethan's. From the moment she came in, Ethan's gaze was locked on her and didn't leave. Seeing her drinking and mingling effortlessly with other men, Ethan clenched his back teeth. When he saw Leo's hand on Aurora's shoulder, Ethan downed the drink in his hand and slammed the glass on the table. Ian jumped in fright, exclaiming, "Ethan, what are you doing?" Ethan didn't answer Ian, his eyes still fixed on Aurora. Ian also noticed something was wrong. He followed Ethan's gaze and saw a familiar figure. Wasn't that the recently returned heiress of Shengyi, Aurora Ainsworth? Why was Ethan staring at her, looking like a jealous husband? Very few people knew about Ethan's marriage to Aurora, only his closest friends knew. They didn't have a wedding, not even a dinner with relatives and friends. So Ian only knew that Ethan had a wife with no background who stayed at home doing chores. He thought her surname was Yun, but he had never seen her. Therefore, Ian would never connect Ethan's no-background wife with Aurora Ainsworth. "Isn't that Shengyi's Miss Ainsworth? Why are you staring at her?" Ian said curiously. "You haven't fallen for her, have you?" Just as Ian finished speaking, Aurora got up and left the booth. Seeing this, Ethan also got up and walked in Aurora's direction. "Hey, where are you going?" Ian shouted at Ethan's back, but only silence responded. So Ian stopped shouting. Let him be. He's heartbroken, a little crazy is understandable. Aurora went to the restroom and started dry heaving by the sink. It was strange. She had a great tolerance for alcohol. Why did she feel a bit unwell today? Maybe she had been too tired lately. She needed to find time to go to the hospital for a checkup. Chapter 14. As soon as Aurora came out of the restroom, she saw Ethan leaning against the doorway, seemingly waiting for her. Although they were divorced, they now had the additional layer of being business partners, so Aurora didn't ignore him. She walked up to Ethan and smiled gracefully. "What a coincidence, Mr. Kingsley, I didn't expect to see you here. Meeting at the door of the women's restroom, what a coincidence indeed." "It's not a coincidence. I was waiting for you," Ethan said in a low voice. Aurora didn't know if Ethan was genuinely clueless or just pretending, but he answered her question with a straight face. Wasn't she being sarcastic? Couldn't he tell? So annoying, but she had to keep smiling. "Is there something you need, Mr. Kingsley?" "I never knew the wife I spent day and night with had such a high tolerance for alcohol." "Ex-wife," Aurora corrected. "We're already divorced." "Are we?" Ethan smiled slightly, reaching up to loosen the tie at his chest. "I remember we signed a divorce agreement, but we haven't gone to the city hall to get the divorce certificate." Since returning to the Ainsworth family, Aurora had been busy with company matters and had forgotten about this. Without the official divorce procedures, they weren't truly divorced. "Then let's set a time to get it done," Aurora said unhurriedly. Ethan looked at Aurora's calm and detached demeanor and felt as if a heavy stone was pressing on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. He walked towards Aurora step by step until he had cornered her against the wall. Aurora instinctively shrank back, her eyes full of defensiveness as she looked at Ethan. "What do you want?" Ethan raised his hand and leaned it against the wall, trapping Aurora in his arms. "What do I want? I haven't even asked you why you lied to me." Ethan's warm breath on Aurora's face made her feel a bit flustered. Years ago, she had fallen for Ethan at first sight at a banquet and had someone investigate him. But at that time, Ethan had a girlfriend, Sylvia. Of course, Aurora wouldn't do something like breaking up a couple, so she kept her feelings for Ethan hidden in her heart. Later, when Sylvia went abroad, the small flame of her feelings for Ethan rekindled. But then she learned that Ethan wanted to find a wife with no background, so she defied her family's objections, hid her identity, and married him. In fact, Aurora knew that Ethan was just acting out of spite towards Sylvia. The reason he wanted a woman with no background was simply because she would be easy to control, someone he could easily dismiss with money when he no longer needed her. Aurora naively believed that if she stayed by Ethan's side, one day she would move him and he would fall in love with her. During those 3 years at the Kingsley residence, she worked tirelessly, but Ethan never gave her a second glance. She endured hardships she had never experienced before in the Kingsley household, but in the end, things didn't go as she wished. The moment Sylvia returned, Ethan proposed a divorce. In those 3 years, she hadn't even gotten close to the edge of Ethan's heart, let alone walked into it. The reason Aurora didn't get what she wanted was because she had forgotten to love herself before loving others. In order to love Ethan, she lost herself. She became someone she didn't even love herself, so how could Ethan love her? So now, she didn't want any more emotional entanglement with Ethan. She was completely over him. In the future, she just wanted to be herself and love herself well. She wanted to be with her family and friends and then manage Shengyi Group properly. Chapter 15. Faced with Ethan's questioning, Aurora had nothing to explain. She had hidden her identity only to marry him. Besides that one thing, she had been completely devoted to him, but none of that mattered now. Seeing Aurora remain silent, Ethan pressed on. "Why aren't you speaking?" Aurora let out a cold laugh. "Mr. Kingsley, is there any point in discussing this now? You never loved me, and I don't love you anymore. Finalizing the divorce as soon as possible is the best thing for both of us, isn't it?" The words, "I don't love you anymore," momentarily stunned Ethan. Although he had never had any feelings for Aurora, he could see that she loved him. Even the servants at home felt that Aurora was head over heels in love with him. In fact, right after they got married, he thought Aurora was just after the Kingsley family's money, but later he discovered that wasn't the case. She seemed to genuinely like him. But it was impossible for him to like a woman with no family background, no status, and no education. So he had always turned a blind eye to Aurora's love. He didn't really understand how her love for him came about, because they had only met once before getting married. She had approached him on her own initiative, saying she met his marriage criteria and wanted to marry him. He saw that she was attractive and had a gentle disposition, so he agreed. But how could her love have come so inexplicably and left so suddenly, without giving him time to react? Taking advantage of Ethan's daze, Aurora stomped on his foot hard with her high heel and quickly ran off. After returning to her booth, she still felt a bit unwell, so she had Leo take her home. Once home, Aurora drank a bowl of sobering soup her aunt had made, took a shower, and fell straight asleep. She didn't know why she had been so prone to sleepiness and had a poor appetite lately. Aurora couldn't figure out the reason, so she decided not to think about it. Perhaps she was just tired. She fell asleep shortly after getting into bed. On the other side, Ethan didn't have such a good night's sleep. He lay in bed, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Aurora's image haunted his mind, refusing to leave. So he gave up on sleeping, got up, took another bottle of wine from the cabinet, and sat by the window, sipping it slowly. He looked up at the stars in the sky, wondering if Aurora was asleep yet. In her sleep, Aurora turned over, as if sensing someone was thinking of her. Ethan stayed up all night, replaying the entire course of his relationship with Aurora from the very beginning. He had thought he wouldn't remember much, but every single detail, every moment between them, played out in his mind like a movie. He remembered everything with crystal clarity. When he first brought Aurora back to the Kingsley home, their first night together, the first time she tied his tie, the first time she took care of him when he was drunk, the first time she cooked for him. So many things. He didn't know when it started, but Aurora had become a part of his life, a part of his heart, without him even realizing it. He finally understood why he felt so empty after she left. It was because Aurora had walked into his heart at some point, long ago. When something is suddenly taken from your heart, of course you feel empty, of course you feel unsettled. So he couldn't divorce Aurora. Absolutely not. He started to feel grateful that they hadn't had time to process the divorce papers before she left. This gave them another chance. Chapter 16. The next morning, Ethan went to Aurora's office full of excitement. He wanted to tell her that he had feelings for her, that he didn't want to divorce her. But he learned that Aurora hadn't come to work today. Walking out of the Shengyi Group building, he wanted to call Aurora, but when he opened his phone, he realized he didn't have her contact information. So he could only have someone call Aurora's secretary and ask her to have Aurora call him back when she had a moment, as he had something important to discuss with her. At a private hospital in Rongcheng, Aurora didn't go to work today. Instead, she went for a physical examination. She suspected that she had been too busy lately with an irregular diet, which was causing her to feel nauseous and want to vomit. At this moment, Aurora was sitting across from the doctor, holding her examination report. When the doctor told her she wasn't sick, but pregnant, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. During the 3 years of her marriage to Ethan, she had fantasized about having a child with him. Her mother-in-law, Miranda, would often bring up the issue of not having children, constantly saying that not only was she from the countryside, but she was also a hen that couldn't lay eggs. What Miranda didn't know was that every time she and Ethan were intimate, he would use protection and also demand that she take pills afterward. With such double protection, how could she possibly get pregnant? She had hinted to Ethan before that she wanted a child, but he always coldly brushed her off, saying it wasn't the right time. After a while, she stopped mentioning it. But how could she be pregnant now? According to the doctor, she was already more than 3 months pregnant. It was just that she was thin and didn't show much, so it wasn't obvious. And she herself was rather careless, not in the habit of tracking her menstrual cycle because it had always been irregular, so there was no point in tracking it. It was common for her to miss a period for 2 months. She never thought the reason she missed it was because she was pregnant. Thinking back on what had happened before, Aurora remembered when she might have gotten pregnant. 3 months ago, before she and Ethan divorced, Ethan had come home drunk from a business dinner, and they had been intimate. That must have been the time Ethan didn't use protection. That morning, because her mother-in-law, Miranda, wanted to drink chicken soup, she had gotten up early and forgotten to take the birth control pill. Just that one accident, and now there was a small life inside her. She couldn't help but marvel at the wonder and greatness of life. If it had been before, she would have been overjoyed at the arrival of this child, but now was not the right time for this child to come. On the way home, Aurora touched her flat stomach, finding it hard to believe there was a baby over 3 months old inside. The doctor said the baby was already over 3 months old and advised against an abortion unless absolutely necessary. Moreover, Aurora's physical condition was not very good. Due to long-term use of birth control pills, if she aborted this child, it would be very difficult for her to conceive in the future. This troubled Aurora greatly. She didn't know what to do. In fact, she desperately wanted to be a mother, more than anything. But this child was hers and Ethan's. With parents who don't love each other, can a child grow up happily? If she raised the child alone, would the child be happy without a father? Her own childhood was spent without a father. Although her mother and grandfather doted on her, seeing other children with their fathers brought a kind of sadness that was hard to put into words. Did she want her child to repeat her own fate? Chapter 17, Aurora didn't go back to her private villa, but instead returned to the Ainsworth family home. Catherine immediately noticed that Aurora was in a bad mood. She knew her daughter best. Whenever she sat there in a daze without speaking, she must have encountered a very difficult problem. She personally made a cup of milk for Aurora and brought it over, sitting down beside her. "Summer, what happened? You have to tell me whatever it is and I'll help you figure it out." As she spoke, Catherine handed the milk to Aurora. Aurora had run away from home against her mother's wishes to secretly marry Ethan Kingsley. Now she had returned, pregnant with his child. She really didn't know how to bring it up. "Mom, I'm fine. I'm just a little tired from being so busy lately." Hearing Aurora say this, Catherine's worried heart finally settled. "It's good that you're fine. For company matters, delegate what you can. Don't do everything yourself. Make sure you get some rest." Aurora managed a smile. "I know, Mom. Don't worry." Catherine placed her hand over Aurora's and smiled lovingly. Aurora looked at her mother and noticed the few white hairs at her temples. After her father's death, Catherine had remained single while raising Aurora. Some people had advised her to remarry, but she had refused them all. She was afraid that if she remarried, her daughter would feel wronged. She didn't want her to lose her mother after losing her father. So she chose to be alone for the rest of her life, just to protect her precious daughter. Thinking of this, Aurora felt an immense sense of guilt. Her mother had given so much for her, yet she had not been an obedient daughter. For a few days, Aurora was absent-minded in everything she did because of the baby. Even at work, she would often stare into space. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking at the door had been going on for a while, but Aurora, inside the office, still didn't react. Finally, Miss N, worried that something might have happened to Aurora, pushed the door open and went in. Aurora was staring out the window, lost in thought. "Miss Ainsworth," Miss N called out softly. Only then did Aurora snap back to reality, quickly composing herself and returning to her normal state. "Is something wrong? Mr. Kingsley from Tian's is here." Ethan Kingsley? What was he doing here? Since their two companies were now partners, she couldn't just turn him away. After waiting in the reception room for a while, Aurora slowly pushed the door open and walked in. "Mr. Kingsley, my apologies for the delay. I was caught up with business." Aurora did it on purpose, to make him wait, to let him know that the CEO of Shangyi was not someone he could see whenever he pleased. He had to make an appointment. Having been in the business world for so many years, Ethan naturally understood Aurora's meaning. Tian's group was founded by Ethan's grandfather, but his father was not cut out for business. The Kingsley family had once been on the verge of being kicked off the board of Tian's. It was only thanks to Ethan, who returned from his studies abroad, that their position was saved. In just a few short years, he had taken complete control of Tian's, holding 100 of the decision-making power. This was because he had extraordinary abilities. In the few years he had been in charge, he had multiplied Tian's market value several times over. In Rongcheng, no one had ever dared to make him wait like Aurora had. The Ainsworth family was the richest in Rongcheng, a family of business people for generations. Later, when old Mr. Ainsworth founded Shengyi, the family's power and wealth grew even more. But in recent years, with Aurora away, Shengyi had declined slightly under Julian's management. However, the Ainsworth family had a long history and was still the richest in Rongcheng. Shengyi was just as good as, if not better than, Tian's. So, Aurora had the capital to dare to make Ethan wait. Chapter 18, Is There Something You Need Today, Mr. Kingsley? Aurora didn't want to waste time with pleasantries and got straight to the point. Ethan took out a document, showed it to Aurora, and then tore it to shreds in front of her. Aurora stared at him in shock, momentarily speechless. The document he had torn up was their divorce agreement. Aurora had planned to deal with the divorce once her emotions had settled, but Ethan's current actions left her completely baffled. He was the one who had proposed the divorce. What did this mean now? Seeing Aurora's shocked expression, a smile appeared on Ethan's face. "I don't want a divorce. I like you, Aurora." Faced with this sudden confession, Aurora was completely bewildered. She wondered if Ethan had a fever that had scrambled his brain. Not only did she think it, but she also decided to verify it herself. Aurora walked over and placed her hand on Ethan's forehead. His temperature was normal. So why was he talking nonsense? Just as Aurora was about to withdraw her hand, Ethan wrapped his arm around her slender waist. "What are you doing?" After learning she was pregnant, Aurora had become more sensitive. Now, with Ethan so close, she felt repulsed. If Ethan found out she was pregnant, he would surely not let her go easily. She wasn't afraid of him, but she didn't want to get any more entangled with him. She pressed her hand against his chest, preventing him from getting any closer. Ethan studied Aurora's face, his heart pounding. This was a feeling he had never experienced before. The woman in front of him seemed to be able to make his heart race effortlessly. Seeing Ethan's intense gaze, Aurora pushed him away. "I was just checking to see if you had a fever, spouting all that nonsense." Aurora didn't believe his confession, which Ethan had anticipated, but he had to say it. And later, he would prove with his actions that every word he said came from the heart. "Aurora, I know this might be a bit sudden, but please give me a chance. I will prove to you that everything I said is true." Aurora's eyes scanned Ethan from head to toe. His expression was sincere, and his gaze was deep enough. But that wasn't enough to move her. Before she signed the divorce agreement, if Ethan had so much as beckoned, she would have rushed to him eagerly. But now, no matter how devoted he appeared, she wasn't interested. To say that Ethan liked her, she found it laughable. It felt like a mockery of her past 3 years of servitude, which had failed to win him even a shred of affection. Now that she had let go, she received his confession of love. She thought Ethan was sick. Aurora's lips curved into a humorless smile. "Mr. Kingsley, you should get that checked out." With that, she turned and left, then said loudly to Miss N at the door, "Miss N, show our guest out." Miss N then walked in and gestured for Ethan to leave. Ethan's face instantly darkened, not because Aurora was kicking him out, but because she thought he was confessing his love for her because he was sick. After escorting the dark-faced Ethan out, Miss N couldn't help but shiver. Who wouldn't be intimidated by Ethan Kingsley, especially a dark-faced one? It was terrifying. Chapter 19, From that day on, Ethan began to actively pursue Aurora. Every morning, a bouquet of roses would greet her at work. After work, Ethan would always be waiting for her downstairs at the Shengyi Group building. He had somehow gotten her phone number and would send her messages of concern every day. She would block one number, and he would switch to a new one. Eventually, Aurora couldn't be bothered to block him anymore and just ignored the messages. She also started avoiding him after work. When Ethan tried to see her under the pretext of business, she would delegate the task to her subordinates. During this time, Aurora was busy handing over her company duties. She had hired a professional manager and planned to temporarily entrust the company to them. After much deliberation, Aurora had decided to keep the baby. If she terminated the pregnancy this time, she might never be able to become a mother again. However, she only wanted the child, not the child's father, Ethan, so she didn't plan on telling him about the baby. She wanted to divorce Ethan as soon as possible, go abroad alone to have the baby, and then quietly return. With the baby growing in her belly day by day, she couldn't delay any longer. She had to divorce Ethan as soon as possible. But looking at Ethan's current behavior, it seemed unlikely he would agree to a divorce. So, Aurora came up with a plan. Leo Vance was surprised that Aurora had asked to meet him today. The heiress had been incredibly busy lately, and he had asked her out several times without success. They chose to meet at a coffee shop downstairs from the Shengyi Group building. When Leo arrived, Aurora was already waiting for him. He looked at the glass of juice in front of her, feeling a bit puzzled. "Don't you usually only drink Americanos? Why the change in taste?" "I'm pregnant." Leo's jaw dropped. In contrast, Aurora was perfectly calm, as if she were discussing something as trivial as wanting noodles instead of rice for dinner. "Pregnant?" Leo's exclamation drew the attention of people nearby. Aurora shot him a disdainful look. "Don't make a scene here." Leo's handsome brows furrowed. Was he making a scene? It was clearly Aurora who was being too calm. Aurora then directly asked Leo to act in a play with her, to pretend to be a couple to trick Ethan into a divorce. "You're going to raise the child alone?" Leo asked. Aurora nodded. "Yes." As a childhood friend, Leo was naturally willing to help Aurora with this favor. He didn't say things like, "It's not easy for a single woman to raise a child." He knew Aurora's decision must have been made after careful consideration. Besides, Aurora wasn't alone. He was there too. He would love her child as if it were his own. In fact, Leo had always had feelings for Aurora, but he had never said it out loud. He knew Aurora only saw him as a good friend. If he broke that barrier, they might not even be able to be friends anymore. That wasn't the outcome Leo wanted, so he chose to remain silent. Aurora held her juice with one hand and caressed her still flat belly with the other, her eyes full of determination. "Baby, I will give you a happy life and make sure you grow up healthy and happy." A strange emotion flickered in her heart, one she herself didn't even catch. Chapter 20, that day after work, Aurora didn't avoid Ethan. Instead, she walked out of the Shengyi Group's main entrance with her arm linked through Leo's. Seeing this, Ethan immediately rushed forward and separated them. "Aurora Ainsworth, what do you think you're doing?" Ethan demanded angrily. Compared to Ethan's fury, Aurora was remarkably calm. "I'm holding my boyfriend's arm. Is there a problem?" The woman's cold, distant voice was like a small knife stabbing into Ethan's chest. "Boyfriend?" Ethan's glare shot towards Leo, who met his gaze without flinching. Looking at Ethan's intense and obsessive eyes, Leo felt that it wouldn't be so easy for Aurora to shake him off. Aurora linked her arm with Leo's again. She gave Ethan a cool glance, her eyes filled with indifference. "Yes, boyfriend." She then added, "My lawyer will bring you the divorce papers. I don't want anything. Please sign them as soon as possible, so we can finalize the divorce. If you don't agree, I will file for divorce with the court, and we can go through the legal process." Aurora didn't want to go through the legal process because it would take a long time. She was starting to show, and she didn't have time to waste with Ethan. If Ethan found out she was pregnant, the divorce would be even harder to get. She said this deliberately to provoke him. A man as proud as Ethan would never allow someone to challenge him like this. Evidently, Aurora's plan worked. Anger was written all over Ethan's face. "Aurora Ainsworth, I'll ask you one thing. Are you dead set on divorcing me?" "Yes, I don't love you anymore. The person I love now is Leo Vance." Hearing this, his expression changed abruptly, as if covered by a layer of frost. His brow furrowed tightly, his expression grave, exuding an intimidating severity. "Fine, I'll grant you your wish. See you at the City Hall entrance tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon." With that, Ethan drove off in his car. The weight on Aurora's heart finally lifted. She had been by Ethan's side, taking care of him meticulously for 3 years. She understood his temperament thoroughly. Except for his feelings, she knew him like the back of her hand. She naturally knew how to ignite his anger. Ethan was a domineering and powerful man, admired since childhood, with a strong possessive streak. What was his had to be completely his. Once it was tainted in any way, he would cast it aside. Women were no exception. Ethan would not allow his woman to have another man in her heart, nor would he even think of trying to win her back. It wasn't that he was worried he couldn't win, but because he felt the woman was no longer pure and unworthy of him. The next day, Leo wanted to accompany Aurora, but she refused. She just wanted to get the divorce over with as quickly as possible. Provoking him yesterday was enough. If she brought Leo with her to the divorce today, it might make Ethan think she was eager to be with another man, and he might deliberately delay things. That wasn't the outcome she wanted, so she chose to go alone. Today, Aurora wore exquisite makeup and a black suit dress. The line cut of the dress could easily conceal her slightly protruding belly. Chapter 21, Aurora arrived early at the City Hall entrance. The appointed time was fast approaching, but Ethan still hadn't shown up. Ethan was habitually 10 minutes early for everything. His lateness now made Aurora suspect he had changed his mind. But she didn't dare to call and rush him, afraid his temper would flare up and he'd refuse to go through with the divorce, leaving her at a loss. She waited and waited until 3 o'clock when Ethan finally arrived. Ethan was dressed in a sharp suit, his hair perfectly styled, but under his eyes were faint, dark circles that couldn't be hidden. Aurora gave him a quick glance but said nothing. She didn't want to know what Ethan was up to, nor did she care. She just wanted to get the divorce over with. The two walked into the city hall without a word to each other and processed the divorce. There weren't many people getting certificates today, so they finished quickly, so quickly that Aurora was a bit surprised. She hadn't expected it to be so smooth. The moment she received the divorce certificate, a smile appeared in her eyes. "Baby, Mommy did it. Are you that happy?" A low, magnetic voice beside her pulled Aurora back from her joyful mood. "Of course I am." Aurora glared at Ethan, then quickly walked towards her car. Watching Aurora's retreating back, a sour feeling welled up in Ethan's heart. After leaving the Shengyi group building yesterday, Ethan had gone out for drinks. Ethan, who usually had a high tolerance for alcohol, got unusually drunk yesterday. He didn't wake up until noon today. Then he remembered he had an appointment with Aurora for the divorce, so he slowly got himself ready. He had thought that by being over an hour late, Aurora would have left in anger. He didn't expect her to be sitting there, waiting for him dutifully, without a single word of complaint. Did she want to divorce him that badly? Fine, then Ethan sat in his car but didn't start the engine for a long time. He glanced at the divorce certificate he had casually tossed onto the passenger seat, then slammed his hand hard on the steering wheel. Just then, a couple walked out of the city hall entrance. The woman held their marriage certificate, her face beaming with a smile, while the man's expression was calm. This scene was very familiar to Ethan. He and Aurora had been just like that. The woman carefully opened the marriage certificate in front of the man, but he didn't even glance at it and quickly walked away, leaving the woman standing alone at the entrance, clearly hurt by his indifference. But the sadness only lingered on her face for a moment. She quickly forced a smile and followed after the man. Seeing this, Ethan immediately took out his phone and called his assistant, Mr. Liu. "Find out where Aurora Ainsworth is right now." Mr. Liu's efficiency was high. In a short while, he sent Aurora's current location to Ethan. The hospital. What was she doing at the hospital? At that moment, an 8 o'clock soap opera drama played out in Ethan's mind. Could Aurora have some terminal illness, and that's why she insisted on divorcing him? Meanwhile, Aurora, who was undergoing a prenatal checkup, sneezed several times in a row. "Are you okay?" Leo asked with concern. Aurora shook her head. "I'm fine. I probably just caught a cold from the changing weather." Chapter 22, Ethan sped his car, arriving at the hospital entrance in no time. He ran up and down, searching for Aurora, and finally found her and Leo at the entrance of the obstetrics and gynecology department. The doctor handed the ultrasound report to Aurora. "The baby is very healthy. Remember to come for regular checkups from now on." Leo took the report for Aurora. "Thank you, doctor. The father is very handsome and the mother is very beautiful. I'm sure it will be a beautiful baby," the doctor said with a smile. Ethan's face flashed in Aurora's mind. With such a handsome face, the genes couldn't be bad. Still, she hoped the baby would look more like her. The doctor had mistaken Leo for the baby's father. Neither of them corrected her, just smiling and saying, "Thank you, doctor." Leo didn't correct her because he quite enjoyed the misunderstanding. Aurora didn't correct her because she felt it was unnecessary. She was flying to France next week anyway. On the other side of the hallway, Ethan stood with his back pressed tightly against the wall, as if frozen in place, unable to move. His heart felt as if thousands of ants were crawling over it, gnawing at it. He didn't know how to describe the pain. So, it was because Aurora was pregnant that she was in such a hurry to divorce him. Ethan didn't know how he left the hospital. He only felt that every step he took was incredibly difficult, as if a 1,000-pound stone was weighing down on his body. When Ian Jiang arrived at the bar, Ethan had already drunk a table full of alcohol. This bar was Ian's private property, and Ethan was a regular customer, so the waiters knew him. When they saw Ethan drinking so much, they worried something might happen and called Ian. When Ian entered the private room, Ethan just gave him a faint glance and continued drinking. How strange. Why couldn't he get drunk today, no matter how much he drank? The scene at the hospital kept replaying in his mind. He forced himself to forget, not to think about it, but his mind no longer listened to his commands. The more he tried not to think about it, the clearer the image became. Seeing his good friend so tormented by love, Ian was also troubled. He had only found out yesterday that the heiress of Shengyi Group was the same countrywoman Ethan had been married to for 3 years. And it was she who insisted on divorcing Ethan, but Ethan was unwilling. Previously, when Ethan had dragged him out for drinks to drown his sorrows, he thought it was because of Sylvia. He never imagined it was because of Aurora. He had never seen Ethan like this, repeatedly turning to alcohol to drown his sorrows over a woman. But borrowing wine to drown sorrow only makes it stronger. Alcohol clearly didn't have the ability to dispel sorrow. He patted Ethan's shoulder, his voice heavy. Divorced? Ethan didn't speak, just nodded slightly. Ian got himself a glass and sat down next to Ethan. He took the bottle on the table and poured himself a drink. Come on, brother, I'll have one with you. Ethan ignored his raised glass and continued to drink on his own. Ethan, are you serious? It's just a woman. If you want one, a whole crowd of them will flock to you, Ian said. Ethan was silent for a moment, then downed the wine in his glass. Chapter 23, She's Pregnant. Ethan's words left Ian completely bewildered. What kind of terrible thing did you do to make Aurora insist on divorcing you even when she's pregnant? After saying this, Ian immediately realized he had misspoken and quickly covered his mouth. Ethan's tightly pressed lips exuded a cold indifference, his expression calm, showing no emotion. The child isn't mine. He had always taken double precautions whenever he was with Aurora. It was impossible for her to get pregnant. What the hell, Ian exclaimed. This Shengyi Group heiress was really something else, daring to cheat on Ethan Kingsley. Well, don't be too sad. A man's life, well, sometimes it's just like that. Ian really didn't know how to comfort Ethan. He picked up his glass and forcefully clinked it against Ethan's. I'll risk my life to drink with you today. Cheers. Not long after, Ian began to lose consciousness. Looking at Ian slumped over the table, Ethan shook his head with a hint of helplessness. After lying on the table for a while, Ian suddenly lifted his head. His eyes were fixed on Ethan, and he asked the question he had wanted to ask when he was sober but couldn't. How do you know the child isn't yours? Ian found it hard to imagine that Aurora, with a husband like Ethan, would be interested in another man. Although he didn't want to admit it, Ian had to acknowledge that Ethan's looks were top tier among men. I took very thorough precautions. She couldn't get pregnant. At that time, Ethan had never thought of having a child with Aurora. And now, he was wondering if the outcome would have been different if they had a child together. Even with good precautions, pregnancy can still happen. There's always a chance of an accident. I think you should go and find out for sure. Although Ian was drunk, the words he spoke were more insightful than when he was sober. His words suddenly enlightened Ethan. Ethan stood up abruptly and patted Ian's shoulder. Thanks, brother. With that, Ethan left without even grabbing his coat, not looking back. Ian looked at Ethan's rapidly retreating figure, then at the lonely coat abandoned on the sofa, and slumped back down. Ethan went straight to the hospital, where Aurora had her prenatal checkup. He hadn't expected it to be true, just as Ian had said. The child Aurora was carrying was his. He found out that Aurora was more than 3 months pregnant, and 3 months ago, she hadn't yet left the Kingsley residence. Ethan couldn't guarantee what Aurora had done after leaving the Kingsley home, but before that, he was certain she wouldn't do anything out of line. After learning this, Ethan's previous gloominess vanished, replaced by endless joy. He had just been thinking about having a child of his own with Aurora, and now his dream had come true. But in the next moment, he began to worry again. Aurora was pregnant and still insisted on divorcing him. She must be dead set on it. In Aurora's heart, did she despise him that much? Despise him to the point that she was willing to carry his child without telling him, wanting to give birth to it secretly and alone. Then he thought of Leo Vance. He couldn't imagine his child calling another man daddy. He would absolutely not allow such a thing to happen. Chapter 20. For the next day, as Aurora was about to leave for the company, she saw Ethan's car parked in front of her house. Ethan was leaning against the car, and there were a few scattered cigarette butts on the ground. "What are you doing here?" Hearing Aurora's voice, Ethan slowly looked up at her. Ethan had arrived in the middle of the night. He had wanted to knock on the door and confront Aurora, but then he thought she was probably asleep. He didn't want to disturb her rest, so he had been waiting here all night. Seeing the fatigue on Ethan's handsome face and the faint stubble on his well-defined jaw, Aurora could tell he had been waiting for her all night without sleep. What did he want? Could he be regretting the divorce already? But since the divorce was final, his regret was useless. "Aurora, let's talk." Aurora and Ethan went to a nearby dim-sum restaurant. Last night, standing outside Aurora's house, Ethan had thought about many things. At first, he couldn't understand why Aurora was so determined to divorce him, not even telling him, the father, about the child. Later, he put himself in her shoes and suddenly understood. After learning Aurora's true identity, he had someone investigate her. Aurora had hidden her identity to marry him. During their 3 years of marriage, she had worked tirelessly at the Kingsley home. But all she got in return was a divorce agreement from him after Sylvia came back. Ethan didn't know when Aurora had fallen in love with him, loved him enough to give up her own self. But Ethan knew that if he were in her shoes, he could never do what she did. To humble himself and accommodate the person he loved, even when their heart belonged to someone else. But if that person was Aurora, he was willing to try. He loved her and he owed her. "Aurora, do we really not have a chance to start over?" Ethan said in a pleading tone. Aurora shook her head firmly. "No." Hearing this, Ethan lowered his head, his hands covering his face. Seeing Ethan like this, Aurora was a bit confused. She had a bad feeling. What was wrong with Ethan all of a sudden? He had been furious during the divorce yesterday, but now he seemed remorseful. Yes, remorseful. Could he have found out something? When Ethan looked up again, his eyes were red. He looked at Aurora with deep affection, his eyes like a starry sky, moist yet bright. "Aurora, I've thought a lot lately. I was a bastard, I'm sorry. I did a lot of things to hurt you. I know that nothing I do can make up for the mistakes I've made in the past, but I still want to sincerely say to you, I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm asking you to give me a chance to make it up to you. I no longer hope that we can be together again, I just want to be by your side, to see you often. Please don't go to France, okay? Don't take away my right as a father. Give me a chance to take care of you both. I will do my best to be a good dad. Nothing can make up for a child's longing for a father's love." Chapter 25. In fact, Ethan, like Aurora, was a child who had grown up without a father's love. Ethan's father was a good-for-nothing playboy. Even after getting married, he still liked to fool around outside. Later, he eloped with another woman, went abroad, and never came back. From a young age, Ethan forced himself to be the best among his peers, just hoping his father would notice him more. As he grew older, he realized that no matter how outstanding he became, his father would never give him a second glance. But he still had to be the best. Only by standing at the peak could he make others look up to him. And he would no longer long for anyone's attention. This also led to him being blind to the kindness others showed him, which is why he overlooked Aurora and his own love for her. In fact, the reason Ethan liked Sylvia was also related to his father. In high school, when his father eloped, it was Sylvia who found him crying quietly in a corner. From then on, Sylvia held a special place in his heart. This led to a blind trust in her, which prevented him from seeing her true character. Ethan's words touched Aurora. He had voiced the very concern that had been troubling her. Was she going to let her child grow up without a father, just like she did? No, in her heart, she didn't want that. She knew that for a child, a father's love was irreplaceable. But she couldn't help it. She couldn't give her child a complete family. In fact, a large part of the reason Aurora fell for Ethan at first sight was that he bore a slight resemblance to her father. Was she going to let her child repeat her fate? Seeing the change in Aurora's expression, Ethan's eyes filled with a hope as bright as the winter sun. "Aurora, I ask for nothing else. I just want to be by your side and the child's, to watch our child grow up. Please, don't refuse me, okay?" After a long period of contemplation, Aurora made a difficult decision. She decided not to go abroad, but to stay in Rongcheng. A child needs a mother, but also a father. Besides, her mother was still in Rongcheng, and she didn't want to leave her again. "Ethan Kingsley, I'm not leaving." Hearing Aurora's words, a brilliant smile spread across Ethan's face. But before he could be happy for long, Aurora's next words were like a splash of cold water. "Although I've decided not to leave, it doesn't mean there's anything between us. I won't take away your right to be a father, but our relationship is only that of co-parents. After the child is born, I will have custody. You can come to see him whenever you want, I won't stop you. But all matters concerning the child must be decided by me. If you agree to these conditions, then fine. If you can't, then you won't see the child, and you won't see me again." Aurora could say this because she had no fear of Ethan. They were already divorced, so the child in her belly was naturally hers to decide for. Even after the child was born, if Ethan were to fight her for custody, he would have no chance of winning. Because the child would be so young, a judge would certainly award custody to the mother. And her financial strength was no less than Ethan's. Whatever he could give the child, she could too. She would give her child the best living conditions and the highest quality education. She would respect her child's wishes and let him grow up healthy and happy. This was the source of Aurora's confidence. Chapter 26. What saddened Ethan was not that he couldn't make decisions about the child, but that Aurora drew such a clear line between them. However, this was already a good outcome. At least Aurora wasn't leaving. When Leo learned that Aurora had decided to stay in Rongcheng, he couldn't say whether he was happy or not. In any case, he respected her decision. As long as she was happy, he would fully support her. After deciding to stay, Aurora told her mother about the pregnancy. Catherine didn't blame her. Instead, she asked if she had thought through what it would take to be a single mother. Aurora smiled and told her she had thought it all through and would resolutely walk the path she had chosen. Since that was the case, Catherine said no more. In fact, she was also very much looking forward to the arrival of this little grandchild. As people get older, they tend to enjoy a livelier atmosphere and the joy of being surrounded by their descendants. Ethan did not tell Miranda about Aurora's pregnancy. He knew that Miranda and Aurora did not get along. To be precise, it was Miranda who unilaterally made things difficult for Aurora. Ethan was worried that Miranda would go and trouble Aurora if she found out about the pregnancy. He also didn't want Miranda to bother him about the child. She would surely pressure him to fight for custody, but Ethan never had that thought in his mind. He didn't want the child, he wanted the adult. Aurora continued to work at Shengyi Group as usual. She didn't have the severe morning sickness that some pregnant women experience. The baby in her belly seemed to know that its mother was working hard, so it was always very well behaved. After getting pregnant, her sleep improved, and her skin became more and more supple. Ethan now had a reason to be around Aurora. Today, Aurora left work a little early because it was Theodore Vance's birthday party, and she needed to change into a gown. Leo had arrived early and was waiting for Aurora downstairs at the Shengyi Group building. Theodore Vance had always treated Aurora like his own granddaughter, so she would attend his birthday party no matter what. Ethan also came to pick up Aurora from the Shengyi Group building today, only to miss her. They met again at Theodore Vance's birthday party. Aurora wore a low-key yet luxurious champagne-colored long gown with a white shawl. Her beautiful long hair was simply tied up, making her look cool and elegant, not ostentatious, but with a stunning and luxurious kind of beauty. She entered with her arm linked through Leo's, and immediately became the center of attention. Not only were they a handsome couple, like a pair of jade carvings, but also the heiress of Shengyi Group and the young master of the Vance Corporation standing together were bound to be the focus of the crowd. At this moment, Ethan, who was on the other side of the room socializing, couldn't help but tighten his grip on his glass. Aurora and Leo went to the inner hall to see Theodore Vance. Seeing his grandson and Aurora standing together, A brilliant smile appeared on Theodore's face. He had watched these two children grow up. He knew his grandson, but he didn't know what Aurora was thinking. If the two children could get together, then Shang-Yi and Vance would be a powerful alliance. Most importantly, the two families knew each other well, so there would be no worries if they got married. Chapter 27, Aurora, you're here, come, let Grandpa have a look at you, Theodore Vance said with a smile, beckoning to Aurora. Aurora walked over and sat down beside him, then took out a carefully prepared gift. Grandpa, I know you like tea. This is a small token of my appreciation. Happy birthday. Theodore accepted the gift with a smile. You're so thoughtful, Aurora, not like this grandson of mine who only knows how to make me angry. Grandpa, if you want to praise Aurora, just praise her. Why bring me into it? Leo interjected, slightly disgruntled. Theodore frowned and glanced at him. If you were more promising and brought a girlfriend home, I wouldn't bother scolding you. Then, he turned his gaze back to Aurora, his expression changing to a smile. Do you have a boyfriend, Aurora? Aurora instantly understood what he meant and smiled awkwardly. Leo also remained silent. Seeing that neither of them was speaking, Theodore continued. When looking for a boyfriend, you must find someone you know well, someone who treats you right. That's the only way for a relationship to last. All right, Grandpa, that's enough, Leo interrupted. If he went on any longer, he might as well just announce his ID number. He knew his grandfather was trying to set him up with Aurora, but their relationship could only be that of friends. After chatting with Theodore for a while, Aurora prepared to leave. Her condition required more rest, so she had no intention of socializing with the people outside. Leo offered to see her off, but she refused. After all, it was his grandfather's birthday party, and it wouldn't be right for him, the grandson, to be absent. Aurora walked out of the Vance family villa. The driver was on his way to pick her up, and she had come out early to enjoy the evening breeze. She had only been walking for a short while when a car started following her. She assumed it was a departing guest and paid it no mind. But after a while, she noticed the car was following her slowly. She turned around and saw a familiar black Maybach. Seeing her turn around, the car behind her pulled up alongside her. The windows slowly rolled down, revealing a handsome face. Get in, I'll take you home. No, thank you, I'd like to walk. Hearing this, Ethan also got out of the car and walked to her side. The driver remained in the car, slowly following them from behind. Aurora was no longer as resistant to Ethan. He had promised her he wouldn't fight for the child and wouldn't force her to do anything she didn't want to. So now, in her eyes, Ethan was just the child's father and a business partner. Why the sudden urge to walk? Are you in a bad mood? Ethan asked. I just wanted to feel the evening breeze. It helps me sleep better at night. Lately, Ethan had been specifically researching precautions for pregnant women. He knew that pregnancy could lead to poor sleep, but he couldn't be by her side all the time, so even if he wanted to help, he was powerless. I'll take you to a place where the evening breeze is even better. Want to go? Chapter 28, Aurora thought for a moment, then nodded. Ethan took Aurora to the seaside. Watching the rolling waves, Aurora's heart instantly felt much lighter. The words Theodore Vance had said today had been echoing in her ears. As a longtime friend, how could Aurora not know about Leo's feelings for her? But Leo never said anything, and neither did she. They had always coexisted with this unspoken understanding, but she always felt it was unfair to Leo. If it was never spoken, then Leo would never have a day when he could let go. Aurora only saw Leo as her best friend, and she never imagined a day when they would become strangers. Seeing the slight sorrow on Aurora's face, Ethan took a candy from his pocket and placed it in her palm. Looking at the candy in her hand, Aurora looked at Ethan with a hint of surprise. Why are you giving me candy? Was Ethan treating her like a child? Eating candy can make you feel a little better. Ethan's words made Aurora pause for a moment. Once upon a time, she had said the same thing to him. She remembered when she and Ethan had just gotten married, and he was still grieving over Sylvia's departure. He was gloomy every day, his cold face devoid of any expression. Although Aurora was mistreated by Miranda daily, she still tried every day to find ways to make him happy. Her mother had told her that eating candy could improve one's mood. That was when her father had just passed away, and Aurora couldn't accept it. She would cry whenever she thought of her father, and her mother would give her candy to eat, which would help ease her mood. Aurora unwrapped the candy in her hand and put it in her mouth. A rich sweetness spread through her mouth, and even the sea breeze seemed to be tinged with sweetness, entering her nose and flowing into her heart. "Is it good?" Ethan looked at Aurora with an expression full of expectation, like a child waiting for praise. Aurora's lips curved slightly, and she nodded. "It's good." A faint smile also appeared on Ethan's face. Aurora took off her high heels and held them in her hand, then walked barefoot on the soft sand, letting the waves lap at her calves. Seeing Aurora's relaxed and comfortable appearance, Ethan followed closely behind her, watching her back, the smile on his face growing deeper. He truly wished their distance could always be this close, wished that this moment could pass slower, much slower. As she walked, Aurora felt a slight movement in her belly. She stopped and carefully felt the faint movement on her stomach. It wasn't her imagination, her belly had indeed moved. It was her baby moving. This was the first time Aurora had felt fetal movement, and she found it magical. She placed her hand on her lower abdomen, feeling the gentle kicks. Seeing Aurora stop and clutch her stomach, Ethan immediately rushed to her side anxiously. "What's wrong? Are you uncomfortable somewhere?" Aurora looked up at Ethan, her face full of joy. He moved. Chapter 29. Ethan was stunned for a moment before he realized Aurora was talking about fetal movement. This was Ethan's first time being a father, and many things were new experiences for him. He carefully knelt down and said softly, "Can I listen?" Aurora smiled and nodded. Ethan slowly brought his ear closer to Aurora's belly. He gently supported her waist, afraid of startling the little one. The moment his ear touched her lower abdomen, he could clearly feel the rhythm of life. The feeling was incredibly novel to him, both joyful and exciting. This was his first time experiencing something like this. He looked up at Aurora, so excited he didn't know what to say. Then he slowly pressed his ear to her belly again, wanting to feel that sensation once more. Seeing Ethan like this, Aurora couldn't help but laugh out loud. She never thought that the powerful CEO who dominated the business world would have such a side to him. If anyone else saw Ethan like this, they would probably be shocked speechless. Aurora never expected to see Sylvia again in such a situation. She had just finished dinner with a client and felt her legs were sore from wearing high heels, so she decided to buy a pair of flat shoes at a nearby mall. When she and Miss Ann walked into the brand store she usually frequented, she saw a familiar figure. At that moment, the other sales assistants were busy, leaving only her standing there alone. So she had no choice but to come forward and assist Aurora. After that birthday party, not only had Ethan abandoned her, but even her own parents, feeling she had disgraced them, had left her alone in the country. To survive, she had to come here and work as a sales assistant. With her qualifications, she could have had a good job, but any slightly larger company knew about the party incident and no one dared to hire her. As for smaller companies, she was unwilling to work there, and the salary couldn't meet her spending needs. It was better to work as a clerk in a luxury store. With her looks, she might meet a rich man, and then she could live a life of leisure without having to work. But she never expected that instead of meeting a rich man, she would first run into Aurora. Aurora felt no sympathy for Sylvia's current situation. It was all her own doing. "Miss, what kind of shoes are you looking for? I can recommend some for you," Sylvia said with a forced smile, suppressing her anger. Aurora ignored her words and simply pointed to a pair of light camel-colored flat leather shoes on the shelf. "Bring those for me to try on." Sylvia took the shoes down and respectfully placed them in front of Aurora. She couldn't bring herself to help Aurora try on the shoes. Aurora had no intention of making things difficult for her. She knew they had a history, and someone as arrogant as Sylvia couldn't possibly bring herself to help her sworn enemy try on shoes. The fact that she could greet her with a smile was already a feat, so Aurora took off her own shoes and put on the light camel-colored flats herself. It wasn't that she was particularly kind, just that it was better to avoid trouble. She didn't want any more entanglement with Sylvia. After putting on the new shoes, Aurora walked a couple of steps, found them comfortable, and paid for them directly. Sylvia stood at the door, respectfully seeing Aurora off. Watching her retreating figure, her hanging arm clenched into a tight fist. It was all Aurora's fault that she was in this situation, yet she was powerless against her. When Aurora was trying on the shoes, she noticed that it was a bit difficult for her to bend over. She was also buying flat shoes and wearing loose-fitting clothes. Could she be pregnant? Whose child was it? Chapter 30. The next day, Sylvia was not scheduled to work, so she waited outside the Shengyi Group building, planning to follow Aurora. Aurora's pregnancy was a big deal. Judging by her belly, she must be about 4 months along. At that time, she hadn't divorced Ethan yet, and he had once told her that it was impossible for Aurora to get pregnant with his child. But now that Aurora was so far along, it must mean she had cheated on him during their marriage. This was big news. Whether she sold it to reporters or told Ethan, she could get a handsome reward. The thought made Sylvia's heart leap with joy, as if she were about to strike it rich. Even though her eyes ached from staring at the Shengyi building entrance, she didn't care. Her persistence paid off. In the afternoon, she finally spotted Aurora. Before she could even rejoice, she saw another figure. Ethan had parked his car on the side of the road. As soon as he saw Aurora come out, he eagerly went up to her. He took her bag and held it, then carefully supported her arm. Seeing Ethan like this, Sylvia found it both strange and unbelievable. In her eyes, Ethan had always been a proud and noble person. Even when he loved her most, he had never been so humble in front of her. What kind of spell had Aurora cast on him to make him like this? The tenderness in his eyes was palpable even from such a distance. It made her feel a pang of jealousy, and her eyes filled with anger. Today was the day of Aurora's prenatal checkup. As the father of the child, Ethan naturally had to accompany her. Ever since he heard the baby's heartbeat at the seaside, Ethan had been in a constant state of excitement, doting on Aurora to an almost obsessive degree. He brought her food and drinks every day and was on call 24/7. Whenever Aurora attended a banquet, Ethan was sure to be there. Although Aurora didn't let him reveal their relationship in public, Ethan always stayed within a 3-meter radius of her. If there was any sign of trouble, he would be the first to rush to her side. Aurora told him not to be so dramatic. She was just pregnant, not a porcelain doll. But her words had no effect on Ethan. He continued to do as he pleased. Seeing his stubbornness, Aurora knew that whatever she said would be useless, so she simply stopped trying. The doctor noticed that the person accompanying Aurora for her checkup today was not Leo and felt a bit strange. Because of Aurora and Leo's striking looks, she had a strong impression of them. Ethan caught the doctor's look of confusion, and remembering what the doctor had said to Aurora and Leo at the hospital last time, his possessiveness flared up again. "I am the baby's father." The pride in his eyes and the high-profile tone in which he said it made Aurora want to pretend she didn't know him. It was so childish. He looked like a child in a bragging contest who had just won the final victory. Aurora was now nearly 5 months pregnant. She had hired a professional nutritionist to plan her meals, so only her lower abdomen was slightly protruding, while her limbs remained very slender. As long as she wore loose-fitting clothes, it was still unnoticeable. She planned to stop going to the office after this week and work from home. She didn't want too many people to know about her pregnancy to avoid unnecessary gossip. Everything could wait until after the baby was born. After they left the hospital, Ethan kept staring at the ultrasound report. Seeing the baby gradually taking shape, his heart was filled with joy. Standing in a corner, Sylvia saw this scene, quickly took out her phone to snap a few photos, and then left in a huff. Now that Aurora had Ethan by her side and a child, Sylvia's anger burned. If it weren't for Aurora, all of this should have been hers. It was Aurora who had stolen her life. Chapter 31. The next morning, before Aurora had even gotten out of bed, she was awakened by a call from her secretary, Miss N. "Miss Ainsworth, you have to see what's trending online." Aurora opened her phone and saw the headline. "Shengyi Group President Pregnant Before Marriage Becomes Homewrecker." She clicked on it and saw photos from her prenatal checkup yesterday. The photographer had taken them from a tricky angle, capturing her face clearly but blurring Ethan's. Just as Miss N hung up, Ethan's call came in. "I didn't arrange for that to be posted," Ethan explained anxiously. He had just seen the trending topic and immediately called Aurora to explain. He was worried Aurora would misunderstand him. Their relationship had just started to thaw, and he didn't want it to return to a freezing point. If Aurora thought he had deliberately used this method to expose their relationship, she would surely ignore him again. In fact, even if Ethan hadn't explained, Aurora wouldn't have thought it was him. Although they had gone to the hospital together, the photos only clearly showed her face, making it reasonable to suspect him. But Aurora didn't believe it was him. She had been by his side for 3 years. Although he was cold and arrogant, his character was not one to resort to such underhanded tactics. A man as proud as Ethan wouldn't deign to do such a thing. I know. Hearing that Aurora didn't suspect him, Ethan was stunned for a moment, then made a solemn promise. Don't worry, I will find the person behind this. This incident was clearly aimed at Aurora, and the perpetrator didn't dare to offend Ethan. Aurora already had a good idea of who it was. Ethan wanted to have the trending topic taken down, but Aurora stopped him. The matter was directed at her, so she would handle it herself. Aurora got dressed and went straight to the company, where she called an emergency meeting. During the meeting, the shareholders were quite critical of the trending topic, both overtly and covertly blaming Aurora for letting her personal life affect the company. Aurora simply sat in her chair with a faint smile, not bothering to argue with this group of old-fashioned men. Seeing her calm and composed demeanor, someone couldn't sit still any longer. Miss Ainsworth, we need to suppress this trending topic as soon as possible to minimize the impact on the company. That's right, the impact is terrible. Shengyi's stock is already starting to fall. We didn't have these problems before Miss Ainsworth came back. A woman is a woman, after all. People online are saying all sorts of things, that our Shengyi president is pregnant out of wedlock, that she's a homewrecker. You need to give us an explanation, Miss Ainsworth. Who is the father of this child? Vice President Yu, your words are a bit harsh, aren't they? The matter of the child is Miss Ainsworth's private affair. There's no need to discuss it at a shareholders' meeting. Miss N couldn't listen any more and interjected. The man called Vice President Yu, hearing Miss and dare to talk back to him, shouted angrily, "A little secretary like you has no right to speak here. Miss Ainsworth's private life has affected the company, so I have the right to speak. HMPH. Aurora let out a cold laugh. A homewrecker? Where is the wronged party? These people would say anything to slander her. Based on a few photos where the man's face wasn't even clear, they dared to call her a homewrecker. If uninformed people are talking nonsense, shouldn't you, who are present here, know what kind of person I am? All of you here are old shareholders of Shengyi. Some of you have watched me grow up. I respectfully call you uncles. How can you say such hurtful things about me? As a woman, it is my freedom to get pregnant and have a child. I haven't wronged anyone. This has nothing to do with the company. Since someone is using this to stir up trouble, our first priority should be to find the person behind it, not for you to sit here questioning me about who the child's father is." Chapter 30, Aurora's words silenced the crowd, and the noisy meeting room instantly became quiet. After a while, Vice President Yu couldn't help but speak again. "Miss Ainsworth, after all that talk, you still haven't come up with a concrete solution. If this continues to escalate, it will have a huge impact on both you and the company." Aurora shifted her posture, crossing her legs and resting one hand on the table, exuding the sharp aura of a superior. "Does Vice President Yu have any good suggestions? I think you should step down as president for now. First, to distance the company from this matter. Later, you can have a PR team say the pregnancy was just a rumor. After you've had the baby, you can come back, and by then, people will have forgotten about it." Hearing this proposal, the others began to whisper among themselves. Aurora couldn't help but clap. "Vice President Yu, that's truly a great idea." Vice President Yu smiled. "It's my duty. I'm just thinking about the company." Hearing this, the smile on Aurora's face instantly turned to ice. "But your methods are a bit too ugly, don't you think?" "What do you mean?" "I'm doing this for the good of the company," Vice President Yu said sternly. "I think you're doing this for the good of my aunt, Jasmine Ainsworth. If I step down, who will take charge?" "Jasmine?" Hearing Jasmine's name, Vice President Yu panicked. "Don't talk nonsense." Aurora knew that Vice President Yu was one of Jasmine's people. She hadn't removed him because she wanted to know her enemy to win her battles. If she got rid of this Vice President Yu, another one would just appear. It was better to keep him around. Missin had stepped out to take a call in the middle of the meeting. When she returned, she whispered a few words in Aurora's ear. Things were just as Aurora had suspected. It was Jasmine who was behind it. She just hadn't expected the photos to be taken by Sylvia. No wonder she didn't dare to get a clear shot of Ethan's face. Sylvia knew Ethan's methods well. Although she hated Aurora, she wasn't stupid enough to offend him. What she didn't know was that, when it came to ruthlessness, Aurora was in no way inferior to Ethan. From a young age, she had seen plenty of scheming and backstabbing in the business world by her grandfather's side. Ruthlessness was just a means of self-protection. Misson printed out several copies of the evidence of Jasmine and Vice President Yu's collusion and distributed them to every shareholder. She also provided evidence of Vice President Yu's embezzlement and misuse of company funds over the years. Looking at the documents in his hands, Vice President Yu's face showed a look of astonishment. He had been so careful. How could Aurora have found out? He had overlooked the fact that what goes around comes around. There are no secrets that can be kept forever. If you do something, you have to be prepared for it to be discovered. A short while later, police officers walked in and handcuffed Vice President Yu in front of everyone. He was being arrested for embezzlement and other criminal activities. At home, when Jasmine learned that her plan had failed, she started throwing things and smashing furniture. That bitch Aurora had not only sent her son to prison, but had now also removed her only spy in the company. It was all the old man's fault for being biased and leaving the company to Aurora. The company should have belonged to her son. Back then, Jasmine had chosen a live-in husband specifically to fight for control of the company. Her older brother had died young, but she never expected the old man to bypass him and pass the company directly to Aurora. Jasmine had harbored this grudge for many years. Chapter 33. After Vice President Yu left, the meeting continued because the issue was not yet resolved. Although Aurora had been framed, and the online rumors about her being a homewrecker were started by Vice President Yu, the incident had already happened and caused an impact that still needed to be addressed. While they were in the meeting, the public opinion online had already undergone a dramatic change. When Misson noticed, she quickly displayed the current online situation on the large screen in the meeting room. Seeing the content on the screen, Aurora had mixed feelings. Ethan had posted a clarifying statement. "The child is mine. We are in a loving relationship. I pursued her." He had also attached a photo of them together at the beach. Seeing the handsome and beautiful couple, with one being the CEO of Tian's group and the other the CEO of Shengyi Group. A powerful alliance. All the comments slandering Aurora as a homewrecker were buried. They were replaced by a stream of blessings. In fact, this was undoubtedly the best solution. Any PR statement would have been met with public skepticism. Ethan's action told everyone it was just a misunderstanding and also gave the child a clear identity. With the matter resolved, the crowd dispersed. Aurora, however, remained in the meeting room, still in a daze. By doing this, Ethan had not only solved her and Shengyi's problem but had also put himself in the public eye. Just then, Aurora's phone rang. It was her mother, who had also seen the news online. Aurora hadn't told her mother who the child's father was. Now that everything was out in the open, she naturally had to go back and explain. As she walked out of the meeting room, she saw Ethan waiting for her at the door. "How long have you been waiting here?" "I've been here the whole time." Ethan had been there since Vice President Yu was questioning Aurora about the child's father. "I'm sorry," Ethan suddenly said, lowering his head, his voice soft. "Sorry for what?" "For making the decision to go public without your permission." Ethan's voice grew quieter. Although Ethan's actions had solved all the problems, he also had his own selfish motives. In the public's mind, he and Aurora were now a couple. Aurora had never thought Ethan would ever apologize so cautiously. The CEO of Tian's was known for being decisive and never having to apologize for his decisions. Seeing Aurora remain silent, Ethan thought she was angry and continued, "If you don't like it, once things have calmed down, I will publicly clarify our relationship, say we broke up amicably, and that the child is yours." Aurora didn't care what others said or thought, as long as it didn't affect her life. She looked at Ethan and said calmly, "You don't have to be sorry." She paused for a moment. "Thank you." With that, Aurora walked past him. Ethan quickly caught up to her. "Where are you going?" "Home." Ethan went back to the Ainsworth home with Aurora. He knew she was going home to explain the situation about the child to her mother. As the father, he naturally had to go with her. Aurora initially didn't want him to go, but she couldn't resist his persistence and had to let him. On the way, Ethan called his assistant, Mr. Liu, and asked him to prepare gifts and wait for him at the Ainsworth's entrance. Mr. Liu was extremely efficient. After receiving Ethan's call, he quickly prepared the gifts as instructed. When Ethan and Aurora arrived at the Ainsworth home, Mr. Liu had already been there for a little while. Aurora walked in and saw her mother sitting solemnly on the sofa. She must have been sitting there waiting ever since she called her. Aurora went over and sat next to her mother, linking her arm through hers and resting her head on her shoulder, acting cute. "Mom, I didn't mean to hide it from you. I just hadn't figured out how to tell you." Chapter 34. Catherine was about to say something when she saw Ethan walk in from outside, followed by his assistant carrying large and small bags of gifts. "Hello, Auntie." Catherine looked Ethan up and down before recognizing him as the man her daughter had run away from home and hidden her identity to be with. The man who had taken 3 years of her daughter's youth and left her with nothing but a divorce certificate and a child. Her face immediately fell, and she wouldn't even give him a proper look. "You still have the nerve to show your face here." Faced with Catherine's accusation, Ethan lowered his head slightly. It was true that he had wronged Aurora, and her mother's attitude towards him was completely understandable. "I'm sorry, Auntie. I wronged Aurora. I know my mistake now, and I will be 1,000 times better to her and the child in the future." Catherine glanced at him. His attitude seemed sincere, but she still couldn't forgive him in her heart. No mother could forgive someone who had hurt her daughter. Catherine asked both Ethan and the gifts he brought to leave. Just looking at him annoyed her. Ethan, having been turned away, wasn't angry. He understood her actions. It was all deserved. If his own daughter were to meet a man like his former self, he would be even harsher than Catherine. Seeing Ethan's crestfallen look, Aurora felt a little bit of schadenfreude. Seeing Aurora trying to suppress a smile, Catherine was also angered by her. "What are you thinking?" Faced with her mother's question, Aurora was a bit confused. "What do you mean, what am I thinking?" "About Ethan Kingsley. Are you going to get back together with him?" Aurora was momentarily flustered, then shook her head. "To me, he's just the father of my child, nothing more." Hearing her daughter say this, Catherine said no more. She couldn't make decisions for the younger generation. As long as Aurora could be happy, she would be content. As for Ethan, she could see the love for Aurora in his eyes now. How their story would end was not up to her as a mother to decide. "What about Leo?" Catherine suddenly asked. Aurora smiled helplessly. "What does this have to do with Leo?" "You child, can't you see that Leo likes you?" "Dear mother, please don't worry about these things. Leo and I are just friends, and besides, he's gone abroad now." After Theodore Vance's birthday party, Leo had confessed his feelings to Aurora, and she had rejected him. Leo hadn't expected her to accept. He had been sent by his grandfather to develop the overseas market and would be gone for at least 2 years. He just wanted to give himself some closure before he left. Her rejection was within his expectations, but it was okay. Now that things were out in the open, they were still friends. They were grown up now, no longer in that sensitive, youthful phase. Even if they couldn't be together, their years of friendship still remained. Hearing Aurora's words, Catherine felt a sense of regret. Leo is a good kid. She would have been very at ease if Aurora could have ended up with him. The next day, when Sylvia went to work, she was told by the manager that she didn't need to come in anymore. He also told her that she had offended someone she shouldn't have, and no one in Rongcheng would hire her now. When she had taken the photos to Jasmine, she had been given a deposit of $100,000. So she went back to Jasmine's house to ask for the rest of the payment, only to be driven away by the maid without even seeing her. With nowhere else to go, Sylvia had no choice but to leave Rongcheng. Chapter 35. Time passed quickly, and soon it was time for Aurora to give birth. Listening to Aurora's painful cries from the delivery room, Ethan and Catherine waited anxiously outside. During this time, Ethan had frequently visited Catherine at the Ainsworth home. Even when he was driven away, he persisted, so Catherine's attitude towards him had softened slightly. After more than an hour, Aurora still hadn't been able to deliver the baby. A doctor came out of the delivery room. Ethan and Catherine immediately went up to him. "Doctor, how is my daughter?" Catherine asked anxiously. "The mother is very weak and has fainted. The situation is not good right now. The family needs to decide whether to save the mother or the child." Save the mother. Before Catherine could even react, Ethan had already spoken up emotionally. His expression was agitated, his face pale, and beads of sweat dotted his forehead. After learning the family's wishes, the doctor went back into the operating room. Ethan paced back and forth in front of the operating room door, his heart pounding, his mind filled with a chaotic jumble of thoughts that gave him no peace. After another long hour, the light above the operating room door went out. The door opened, and Aurora was wheeled out. A nurse also came out holding the baby. "Congratulations, mother and son are both safe." Ethan didn't even hear the nurse's words, nor did he glance at the baby. He rushed straight to Aurora's side. He held her hand tightly, the tension of the moment finally released. The tears that had been welling up in his eyes could no longer be held back. They streamed down his face, dripping from his hand onto hers. Looking at the red-eyed man before her, a wave of warmth spread through Aurora's heart. She weakly lifted her hand and wiped the tears from his face. "Don't worry, I'm fine." Ethan nodded, but the hands holding hers couldn't stop trembling. Seeing this scene, Catherine couldn't help but tear up as well. Aurora looked at the two of them and didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but her heart was filled with warmth. Aurora spent her postpartum recovery at the Ainsworth home. Ethan had hired the most professional postpartum nannies for her. With the addition of her mother's care, Aurora recovered quickly. During this period, Ethan was by her side every day. Aurora began to wonder if Tian's group had gone bankrupt. Otherwise, how could its CEO be so idle? And for some reason she didn't understand, her mother was no longer so hostile towards Ethan. In fact, the way she looked at him was starting to resemble a mother-in-law looking at her son-in-law, growing fonder each day. So, when Ethan wasn't around, Aurora quietly asked her mother for the reason. Only then did she learn about how, on the day of her delivery, Ethan had unhesitatingly chosen to save her. Aurora had always thought that Ethan's feelings for her were just a result of him not being used to her absence, which was why he wanted to win her back. Later, she thought it was because of the child that he was constantly around her. But as time went on, Aurora realized that it didn't seem to be what she thought. Ethan always considered her in everything he did. She could see that he had changed a lot recently. He was no longer as domineering and arrogant as before, but had become gentle and considerate. And he knew she didn't want to think about the past, so he never brought it up in front of her, nor did he mention anything about them getting back together. It was as if he really just wanted to be by her side, asking for nothing in return. Until now, when she learned that he had resolutely chosen her in a life or death situation, did she finally understand that Ethan wasn't asking for nothing. He had always been asking for her. He just hadn't said it out loud, but had shown it in all the details. A month had passed, and Aurora could have gone out, but both Ethan and her mother insisted she rest longer for her health, so she only moved around within the manor. When Ethan came back from taking the baby out for some sun, he saw Aurora standing on the balcony. He handed the baby to the nanny and immediately went upstairs. He nervously helped Aurora back to bed and tucked her in tightly. "Why are you standing on the balcony again? You can't catch a cold right now." With that, Ethan turned up the air conditioning in the room by a couple of degrees and then poured her a glass of hot water, placing it by her bed. Watching Ethan bustle around for her, a beautiful curve unconsciously appeared on Aurora's lips. Seeing her staring at him, Ethan asked nervously, "What's wrong? Are you uncomfortable somewhere?" "Ethan Kingsley, do you still like me?" Faced with her question, Ethan thought seriously for a moment, then shook his head. "It's not like, it's love, I love you." Hearing this, a smile as bright as a flower bloomed on Aurora's face, like the warm sun in winter, gentle and warm, shining into Ethan's heart. Perhaps she could try to start over with Ethan, not just for the child, but for herself.